Alright, let's, first of all, is it recording at this correct place? Yes. Alright, I'm gonna be playing some MCC with Eric today. Let me call him. It's not making that call audio because it's streamer mode. Hello? Oh, you are incredibly quiet. Let me also lower the MCC volume.
Also, give me 1 second. I'm gonna hit the bathroom.
Okay. Let's do about, I don't know, 40%? I don't know why I'm using my mouse for this. I can... Let's switch it up. Let's see. Borderless. Quality. Controls. Alright, well, that seems fine to me. Let me try and get this configured. Alright, well, while that happens, I might as well tell it to stop telling me I have new rewards. I'll have weapon skins, do I? Oh. I like just woke up. I couldn't fall asleep until like 11 a.m. And I only got up because Eric and we had scheduled to play stuff because I need to socialize more. Nothing's gonna beat this work.
Hi, hello.
Hello. I don't actually like this helmet. Okay, can you make yourself louder? Otherwise I can bring your volume up.
I can increase my... if I remember how to do things. Input volume. How is that?
That's much better.
Okay.
Alright, why does it still say I have customization options? Like, I've gone through everything, but it keeps giving me the alert in the menu.
It updated that for me like 3 different times, and also I played this a bit last night just to, because I wanted to make sure I had everything installed.
Yeah.
And I couldn't connect to servers for like almost half an hour.
Oof.
Like it even kicked me out of my own game, not campaign, but just like a map.
Oh, just custom games?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I don't know why.
I was playing, because I'm playing on the desktop right now, and I forgot that I hadn't played MCC on this PC yet. So it's a good thing we chose to play Reach, because, you know, by default it only installs Reach.
Yeah.
And so after that I realized, oh, I have to queue all the games to install, and I had to leave MCC open. Because if you just close it, Steam will continue downloading whichever game MCC was downloading at the time. It won't download the rest, though.
Oh.
Yeah, so I had to leave MCC open for a while. Just to download all the games in their multiplayer modes. But they're all downloaded now.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I was trying to remember if I just downloaded the campaigns or also the multiplayer, and I have everything installed. So
Yeah. I think luckily, even if you have only the campaigns installed, I think Firefight is still an option. But yeah. Oh, the Pizza Time skin. Well, I don't remember getting these. I guess I unlocked these. I remember getting Mr. Chief. Oh, well, I guess that one's for Women's History Month, because I played this month. Age of Empires is having a Women's History Month event.
there were women in history.
You know, they don't want to tell us about it. It's the secret the government doesn't want you to know, I guess. Actually, they're kind of ambivalent to it, but they're not enthusiastic about it either. Yeah, so I can join your roster, I think, and then you can be in charge of what we do. Yeah, let me just join your lobby.
Okay. There you are. I was thinking about whether or not I wanted to try to play this on controller. Because I know a lot of people play Halo on controller, but I've been having issues with my controller as of late because it would drift to the top left. My left thumbstick
Oof.
would drift to the top left, and lately it's been like in menu controls. If I tap up at all, it would just scroll up constantly, and when I would tap down, it usually fix it. But now if I tap down, it starts to scroll down constantly, and now it's not even. Sometimes doesn't register moving it to the top right.
Huh.
So I am waiting on a new controller coming in.
I wonder if there's like something in the stick.
I have no idea. I can probably get this fixed.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be too difficult. But
I found out that you can fix controllers with like buttons stuck down. That it's usually just gunk.
mm-hmm. Oh, that happened. That happened to PS1 controller playing Legend of the Dragoon, because you have to. There are a lot of the things you have to mash.
Oh
And
yeah.
our X button started to stick because you hit the X button so much on a PlayStation.
Yeah. Especially when you're doing like those moves with like a bunch of follow-up attacks
Yeah.
every time. Yeah,
Alright.
I ruined the B button on a GameCube controller in Alien Hominid. Just pressing B to shoot constantly as fast as I could. And that B button never came up again. Speaking of Legend of Dragoon, they put the soundtrack on Spotify. I think the information's in Japanese, but I can still send a link to you if you want to listen to it in an official capacity.
Oh, okay.
Which I thought was kind of out of nowhere that they put that up. It was just in my recommended, and I'm like, what?
Maybe they heard you hearing me talk about it.
Maybe. Or maybe they heard me complaining about it when I finished it in high school after having fond memories of it as a kid, and coming back to it and going...
Is it not as good going back?
Oh no, I actually finished it. Despite being a 4-disc game, you can beat it in under 30 hours. I think they split it to 4 discs to have 4 discs. Because if you look at the file size, it's big enough to just fit on 2 discs. Mm-hmm. And that's...
Yeah, I still have...
I
found it the other day. I was looking through where I keep a bunch of my other games for different things, and it was just sitting there right in front. I'm like, oh, there it is. Now I just need a way to play it.
Yeah, because it doesn't like to play nice on PS2s. Because which is funny because it came out in 2000 instead of the PS2. But it will detect the PS2 as unofficial hardware, and so it will activate its anti-piracy stuff.
Yeah.
Which is why you get stuck in fights.
After a boss battle on the second disc, the screen went black. After it would show the experience and stuff gotten, and then it would fade to black, and then it would just stay black.
Yeah. If you play it on a PS1 or a PS3, it doesn't do that though.
I think I have a PS1 still.
If
Might be
you
able to plug that in.
if you don't, I have two. You can borrow one. One's like an older model PS1 that still has like the parallel port on the back, and one is like the one that's branded as PS1, like the little tiny one. I want to get the screen for that someday, but they're expensive. But I always wanted, you know, when they put screens on top of consoles, like so you could play it in the car.
Yeah, no, we had a portable PlayStation.
Yeah, I never had the screens for, like, I always wanted those as a kid. I just dreamed
Quote
about...
unquote portable. It still needed a power outlet, but
Yeah.
you know, it had a screen that came with it.
Yeah, I always wanted to do that. I'm like, what if I could play GameCube in the car?
It was it's pretty fun until you take it to your aunt's house during Thanksgiving and go up and, you know, sit in a room to play it, and then when dinner time comes, you go to get food, trip over the power cord and unplug it.
Ooh. I would worry that you'd ruin discs on bumpy roads.
Honestly, I don't think, I mean, I don't think we ever had an issue like that.
Well, I just worry because I remember the early 360s, how they'd break discs if you tilted them at certain angles.
True. Oh yeah.
And why the PSP discs came in a caddy.
Alright, what game modes do you like playing?
I'm fine with anything, really.
Okay, I am also okay with anything. So I can just leave everything and everything. Do you want to do big team battle or something smaller, free for all, whatever?
Let's do big team battle.
Okay.
Let's get as many players in there as possible.
Alright, are you good to go?
Yep. Yeah, I have, so, all of my 360 controllers died. I think I said this last time when I was playing with, Zach, the Zach with the CH. But they were all the official wireless ones.
Yeah.
And I hadn't used them for a while before I moved, but they still had batteries in them.
Oh, did they corrode?
Oh, yeah, they had been packed away for like at least 2.5 years, and I finally pulled them out. And all of those batteries burst. So none of those controllers were recoverable. And finding good wired ones is tough. Especially because the company I used to rely on doesn't make them anymore.
Yeah.
Just because the 360 market isn't exactly lucrative, and I did need a 360 one to play on my 360, which I have set up in the same room. Because sometimes I'll still play it. Especially since it makes sense for me to keep buying games for the 360, since a lot of them are backwards compatible. So I can still play them on the Xbox One. And sometimes there's stuff that I'm like, I don't want to get it before it disappears.
Yeah. I have no idea why PlayStation stopped doing backwards compatible.
Oh, well, apparently their current president has no appreciation for older games and wonders why people would ever want to play them. They look ugly and the graphics are old.
I literally only own a computer to play 10-year-old games.
Yeah. I'm like, give me those good stats that I can play Quake 2 with ray tracing. Which is hilarious, but it's also like, you know, the meme is true. There are times where I do play like new games that are really demanding, but let's be honest, most of the time I'm playing...
Good, we have some weed smoker on our team.
Oh, right. Girls for Curls. Curls for Girls 69. Salty Fawn. You know, as much as Halo 4 is not the best Halo, I kind of like that Halo 4 mode, Dominion, where you capture bases and fortify them. Okay, where are you?
I'm currently on the back of a Goss Warthog.
Okay, I was trying to, like, I couldn't remember your tag.
Okay, I'm getting off. It's 726.
Okay, come back here. I can drive a Warthog. Rocket one.
Alrighty.
Oh, there's Salty Fawn. Oh!
You're welcome.
So, the controller that I bought, it looks and feels identical to a real 360 controller.
Oh yeah, I know there's a lot of third-party controller makers that make really good quality controllers.
Yeah, you just got to be careful because there's also some real shitty ones. But this one looks so identical that I'm like, is there gonna be a lawsuit? The only difference is that it has the company logo instead of Xbox's logo on the center button. But otherwise, it looks identical because even if you can find a controller that looks the same, it's really hard to get one that feels the same. Like, even, like, remember when they made those GameCube controllers that plugged into Wiimotes?
I believe so.
Yeah, like, those kind of looked the part, but they did not feel the part. And those were official. But they didn't feel like GameCube controllers. I mean, even other than the right stick being a real stick, rather than the C stick, they just didn't feel the same. The new ones they made for Smash are good, though. I only have the one for Smash 4. I didn't feel the need to buy the controller adapter for Smash Ultimate because the same adapter worked, so...
Cool, got a LASIK. Doesn't happen that often.
I have accomplished nothing so far. I've died a few times.
I'm somehow top of our team.
I'm right above bottom of our team because I've somehow scored 10 points, probably getting an assist.
It was probably assist because I don't think the kill from the grave counted for an assist for you.
Yeah.
Even though I got it while you were driving. Well, it's kind of while you were driving me.
Yeah. I mean, I'll get wheelman bonuses, but if I die before you get that kill, I don't know if I'll get a wheelman bonus.
Yeah, because I killed the Banshee. That, you know, came right up on us.
I thought, oh, we'll drive around for a while.
And then we didn't.
And then we didn't. I still think it's kind of sad they're shutting down multiplayer on the 360 for Halo.
Yeah, that's...
Like, you can play MCC, but what if you're, like, too poor to afford a device that can play MCC? Or, you know, you're like, I already bought these games? Because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there with 360s who just didn't invest in new consoles, or invested in, like, a PlayStation or a Switch instead of a new Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
It spawned
that happened with me. I had a 360, and for the longest time, I didn't buy an Xbox One or PS4, and then decided to buy PS4.
Yeah, I mean, I got a PS4, and the only reason I have an Xbox One to play is because Danny got, they got the Halo 5 Xbox One at, like, a pawn shop, I think. And they barely used it because, I mean, any cross-platform games tend to perform worse on the Xbox. You know, comparing the base Xbox to the base PS4, because we don't have any of the, you know, the upgraded versions.
Yeah, and there are more exclusives on PS4 because Microsoft is shit as exclusives.
Yeah, they're exclusives. I mean, they've got Halo, but, like,
and
only
Halo
the...
hasn't been
only
good
the,
since...
Yeah.
3?
Only the old ones are good. Like, I really like ODST. Kind of like, but like, either way, like, Halo's not good anymore, really. At least I don't feel like it is.
I mean, fingers crossed for Infinity, but is that ever coming out?
Fingers crossed, but I do not have good feelings about
Craig,
it.
So.
Also, like, everything they promised has been like, they're selling skins, they've removed skin customization, they promised no Battle Royale, there is Battle Royale now, they promised no microtransactions, there are. Like, that thing's in trouble. Like, it's so in trouble, some of the ex-Halo people from Bungie came in to supervise the project. Which, like, that was really late in development that happened. It also doesn't help that Microsoft is like, hey, you're developing a new engine from scratch. Also, you make it work on the base Xbox One, the Xbox One X, the Xbox Series S, the Xbox Series X, and PC. Which, like, I would totally understand if in order to make the game work better, they cut a platform out, or at least saved a platform for porting later, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Just because trying to develop for multiple SKUs can add a lot of complications.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, there was a game... Oh, Cyberpunk had that issue.
Yeah, partially because Cyberpunk didn't start the console porting until very late in development.
Yeah, so that's another thing I'm always confused about with games that take 2 years to come out, or not 2 years, sorry, 2 decades to come out. Um, they start with certain technology, and then as technology advances, is it that easy to upscale?
I mean, well, okay, so with assets, generally, yes, but with other things, maybe not. And it depends. Nowadays, so like in the old days, you'd just make an asset, and that would be it. You know? Like you'd make a 3D model for the game, and that would be the 3D model. Maybe you have some LODs, but either way. But nowadays, I think one of the first games to do this was actually the first Gears of War, is they actually make like high poly, like crazy high poly, like millions or billions of polygons models.
Oh, so it's easier to upscale it?
Yeah, yeah. So what they do is they create that base high quality model, and then they lower the poly count, and then they fine tune it by hand. And sometimes they do that with textures as well, where they're originally a high quality painted file, and then export them, which is why sometimes the HD texture packs that come out for games so quick, sometimes they look so spot on, because sometimes they're new textures, sometimes they're filters, but sometimes it's because they had an original high quality version. But if you don't have original versions of those assets, it's a big pain. Or if hardware changes so much.
And so if you're starting, on a game with a certain console in mind, I guess, do they plan for future consoles, starting with future consoles instead of current consoles, or?
Sometimes that can happen midway in development. I feel like Halo Infinite would probably have early notice, but I mean, maybe not. Microsoft is really bad at communicating to their devs. Cyberpunk definitely knew. The problem is that even though Cyberpunk was advertising PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, they didn't ever start the work on that. Because usually, even if you have a primary platform to develop for, once the game's gotten so far, you'll start trying to get it up on the other consoles so that you can develop those simultaneously. That's what happens nowadays generally.
Okay,
Cyberpunk didn't do that.
Like any development that might be for a certain console that does it just get trashed if a new console's coming out, or
they tend to retrofit what they can for the new hardware.
So in theory, what should still work for a specific console?
Yeah, but I think the issue is that, I mean, retuning this stuff, well, it's not like you have to make the game all over again. It still is a lot of work. And the other thing is that even if you can get the old code running on new hardware, it doesn't exactly run on new hardware like you'd expect. Like, it might not be running at the resolution or frame rate that you'd actually want out of the new hardware, because it wasn't designed with that in mind. It was optimized for old hardware.
Yeah.
Especially if you build, like, a loading system that takes advantage of the Xbox's, like, ES RAM. Because the Xbox One, the problem is it has the same amount of RAM as the PS4, but the RAM is DDR2, I think, or it's DDR3, while the PS4 is DDR4. No, that's probably not right. Either way, the RAM is much slower. And so porting to Xbox One requires optimizing this RAM that's really close to the CPU. It's 16 megabytes of ES RAM, but it's very fast. And so a lot of optimizations for the Xbox One end up taking advantage of that ES RAM. But I would say the main thing when it comes to consoles nowadays is that they handle rendering pipelines somewhat similarly. I guess it's less the assets that you'd have to retool, unless you change your target. Like, if you change your visual target, that can change a ton of things. But the main thing is actually, I imagine it would be getting it to work with, like, the console APIs. Like, yes, you got it to work, but it runs like shit, because you haven't actually optimized it for, like, because you can run DirectX on Xbox, but you can't run DirectX on PlayStation. they have a very low-level API you have to mess with that's proprietary, that only PlayStation uses. So, like, even if you can get the code up running, it's kind of like running a game with really bad DirectX drivers. Or, you know, when a game comes out on PC and it's like, hey, by the way, this runs like shit on AMD. It's not even necessarily because there's a hardware deficit, it's because...
Poorly optimized?
Yeah, it's just running raw with no optimizations, not built at all in the way that the hardware expects it to run.
Kill you after he killed me.
Oh, that guy who picked up that sword?
Yeah.
And with consoles, you don't necessarily have the hardware grunt to make up for that poorly optimized stuff. But I think one of the main things when it comes to consoles that people underestimate when porting is testing, is that you don't know what kind of bugs have been introduced or performance hitches in new hardware. So you have to go through QA all over again and test this game on every platform and come back and fix bugs for it. And it can become a pain in the ass probably if you're fixing bugs, but you're trying to fix bugs on multiple versions at the same time.
If you fix a bug in a certain version, it might break something else in another version.
Especially because you have to decide, do you want to do a bespoke fix for the PS4 version? Or do you want to change the engine code in general to prevent these problems in future? Or, you know, to make sure there's more parity between the versions so you can update them easier. Because if you start developing that code too much bespoke code, it becomes a pain in the ass. You have to document it. It takes a lot of time. I also want to note I don't work in the games industry. This is mostly stuff I read about.
Yeah, I mean,
more
you
stuff about.
definitely have more knowledge of it than I do.
Yeah. The other thing that can be a pain in the ass is that beyond Q&A, you have to submit code to the developers, to the console manufacturer. Like, you have to submit stuff and they have to test it on their end to make sure, you know, the hardware doesn't break, because you can maybe tell them that nothing will go wrong, but Sony and Microsoft test and have standards and have things they want to change. Not to mention you have to submit to the publisher and the ESRB, and every time you have a different SKU, you know, that adds on to the number of things you have to submit, and you have to wait back for answers and possibly have to change. But with Cyberpunk, the problem is that they didn't even think about consoles when they were developing it.
Oh, were they purely developing for PC?
They were purely developing for PC until the very last minute. Even though they were advertising it on console, they had not touched a console dev kit until very close to launch. And the problem is, the engine just...
So much lunge in this game.
Yeah. Oh, that's right, that ability, the lunge ability. I have never found use out of that.
No, like, just to melee. Because I was
backing right.
Up and lunged,
yeah.
like, a full body's height to somebody.
Yeah, whenever the circle turns red, whenever your reticle turns red, you can lunge to melee. It's like that in Halo Reach as well. I can't remember if it's like that in 3. It's probably like that in 3 with the sword at the very least.
Yeah, with the sword, definitely. I don't think it's with any other gun in 3. I did like quite a bit of 3, but...
Yeah. But no, I think it's only the sword in 3. So the problem is with Cyberpunk, besides the crunch and the fact that they had way too much planned, their scale was way too huge, and the fact that they launched the game early because they thought all the hype and the new consoles, but also the old consoles, and also a global pandemic, and also the holiday season, we can't pass this up, even though it wasn't ready. But the amount it required from the CPU, because of the way the engine was coded, was way too much for the old consoles, because like the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, I say this as old consoles, but I don't have any newer ones, their CPUs actually kind of suck. Because like CPU strength went up a lot between console generations, but the big difference is that when we got to the 360 and PS3, even though they increased from 300 megahertz to 3 gigahertz, the individual threads were much weaker. And the hardware was, I'd say, more specialized. And, okay, so like when you make a CPU, you have to make an instruction set. And those are basically like whatever you can do to talk to the CPU in the most direct level. Like, and they have variants like, you know, x86 has its own instruction set, and x64 does. From what I've heard, the instruction set was much more limited on the 360 and the PS3. Meaning that even though you might have had more grunt force when it came to a lot of the kind of things you do in games, a lot of those instructions were missing. You know, a lot of the things you might rely on to run like physics code in a game or enemy AI, from what I've heard, it became a pain in the ass to code for it and a pain in the ass to optimize for it. And the other issue is that, while they were multi-threaded, their actual single-threaded performance was not nearly the jump people expected, which means people had to shift over from single to multi-threaded development, because all the previous consoles were single-threaded, ignoring weird stuff like the Sega Saturn. And I guess technically the N64, depending on what you did with it. But yeah, the CPUs weren't nearly as big of an upgrade when it came to games performance as people thought, especially when you considered the new demands of running in HD, because graphic stuff can affect the CPU, not just the GPU, especially if you need to move files around. Generally, that's handled by the CPU. So if the GPU needs a texture, the CPU is the component that actually moves that texture from the disk or the hard drive to memory. Which also means that the bigger textures you have, the more the CPU has to work to put those textures in memory. So you're sacrificing CPU power in order to actually get textures to render.
Yeah.
So it's not just like adding graphics forever only burdens the GPU. And while the CPUs, I think in general, were easier to code for on the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, they were still a very minor upgrade. So we've had like 2 generations of not that big upgrades to CPUs for consoles. This current generation finally is a big upgrade to CPUs. But that's also why a lot of the stuff that we used to see in games, like games focused on physics simulation, or how developed the AI is, why that happened less. I mean, one, it becomes harder as time goes on. The problems get bigger, and you need more and more power. But 2 is just because the CPU strength wasn't there, especially if you wanted to get modern fidelity. And so the problem is that Cyberpunk was developing targeting PC CPUs of the era, which by that point were way beyond anything on the PS4 and Xbox One. And so even if their game possibly could run, it's not in the cards with how they designed the engine. Partially because CD Projekt Red tends to run CPU heavy on their engines because they're a PC first developer. And most PC first developers tend to run heavy on the CPU. Console first developers tend to rely more on the GPU. That's also why CryEngine runs like shit on consoles. It's too CPU heavy. And it used to be a problem with Unreal Engine. It took them a few iterations to get that right. So, and in order to prove that it wasn't just that they dropped the ball on porting it, there is a weird gray market motherboard that you can get from China that has the exact CPU that the Xbox One has. Like the same one, because that version of the CPU was never sold for PCs. But you can get a gray market motherboard from China that will run Windows, that has the Xbox One CPU on it. I mean, some other things are different, like you're not going to have the same RAM setup. Like, it doesn't have dual channel RAM support. But pretty much, you're running the Xbox One CPU. And so Digital Foundry did some tests with like a really good GPU on there, because they were only testing the CPU, so they didn't want any GPU bottlenecks to be part of it. So they put like a 3070 on that motherboard and ran Cyberpunk 2077. And they found that it actually runs worse than an Xbox One does, even though it's on PC. Because Xbox One has the benefits of its optimizations, specifically for its hardware, specifically when it comes to data streaming, that running it on a PC of the same stats doesn't necessarily have. The problem is that most PCs have a better CPU than the Xbox One, because the CPU on the Xbox One sucks. So, it's not even like they could fix the port necessarily by just putting in a few hot fixes. They'd have to redesign fundamentally how the game engine works. Because running it on the exact same hardware on Windows, which the game was developed for first and foremost, yields worse results. It's just too CPU heavy. I guess that's the other thing that's a hassle when developing for consoles, is nowadays we don't have static levels that often, right? Like, we tend to have really big levels or open worlds. It's to the point where you can't load the whole thing in memory at once.
Yeah.
And so most games utilize data streaming. You know, it loads in the background while you're playing, and it slowly moves files in and out. And a lot of getting games to run well on consoles now is finding out how to optimize data streaming. How to load things when they need to be loaded while stressing the CPU and the hard drive as little as possible. And you have to change your data streaming setups depending on what hardware you're running on. Like, the PlayStation 4 has a totally different data streaming setup than you might have on the PS4, the Xbox One, because they have different APIs, they have different tools for the developers to access, but also the differences in hardware, like the RAM and the ES RAM, will make you want to change your data streaming setup for the platform. And if you get that wrong, your game can end up running horribly choppy. And I think that's one of the biggest issues in Cyberpunk, is that streaming in Night City is just not efficient.
Oh, okay.
Like, there are way too many calls for loading in textures and models. Which is kind of a problem that games had for a long time. Like, do you remember the wave of GTA clones and how most of them also ran like shit?
Yes, I do.
Like, it's a big problem to solve, especially, in a city where you have a bunch of, like, big, tall buildings. But you might be able to see a ton of them if you're driving down the street or run past them very quick. It becomes difficult to load in that data effectively without the player seeing that you're loading in data. Because generally, like, the whole game world isn't in memory. Like, it's in the CPU sometimes, to keep track of where players are and where physics objects are and where AI is. But as far as the GPU is concerned, it mainly only sees what's on screen.
Yeah.
The less that the GPU sees at one time, the more you can do with the GPU. And the higher frame rate you can run, the more effects you can put in. But also at the same time, if you don't have much loaded in the GPU at once, it means that you have to move data to it at a faster rate. Because as you move faster, which is one of the big problems that Cyberpunk is driving, you have to load that data faster. And if the GPU only has immediately what's in sight, it means it has to make calls for data all the time. And one of the problems with Cyberpunk is there are a lot of bespoke assets, which means that you can't necessarily reuse some of the textures over and over again to ease the data streaming. That was an ally. That was an ally. That was an ally. So if they want to get it running on the old consoles, it's going to be really fucking hard. They're going to have to do some major rewrites. It's going to be a thing that will take multiple years, probably. And at this point, I kind of wonder if they're even going to bother with the PS4 and Xbox One versions. Or if they're going to cancel them and, like, give everyone who still owns it a voucher to get it on the new consoles.
I doubt it. I mean, because a lot of platforms already gave them the ability to refund it, yeah?
Yeah, but some people still have physical copies.
Oh, that's true, that's true.
Yeah, and chose not to refund, because that game sold a lot of discs. A ton of discs moved. But, yeah, not to mention, like, it's still a PR disaster.
Yeah.
And it's going to be bad if they cancel it, but it's also understandable. Like, I mean, okay, what they've done is absolutely shitty. It's a very shitty practice. Like, the way the developers were treated, the way the development was handled, releasing it early was dumb. And not developing for consoles until the last minute was also dumb, because now they've designed the game engine around not console specs, which is so weird considering that they put The Witcher 3 on console. Like, they know what that hardware can do.
They have The Witcher on Switch?
Yeah, they have The Witcher on Switch, which CD Projekt Red themselves also had a hand in that. And then The Witcher was not designed around the Switch. I mean,
I don't think any big game other than Breath of the Wild was designed around the Switch.
Well, even then, Breath of the Wild was also designed around the Wii U.
Really?
Yeah, because it's still on the Wii U. Like, I have it on Wii U. It was gonna be a Wii U exclusive. It just took so long in development that they were like, might as well make it come out on Switch also. Because why would we put this big, huge title on a dead console? And only a dead console. But they also promised it to Wii U owners. And I didn't have a Switch, so I bought it for Wii U. The Wii U version, funnily enough, the Wii U has half the RAM the Switch has. Which means the Wii U the frame rate tends to be lower, the loading times are longer, and there are more stutters. But also, the CPU in the Wii U is not as good at data decompression. Because one of the ways they keep file sizes down in games sometimes is they compress the files, and the CPU will decompress them on the fly.
Doesn't that use up more CPU?
It does use more CPU. I think they did it partially because they had to put it on a Switch cartridge.
Oh, right.
So if you have limited storage space, like a single Blu-ray disc, or you're not Call of Duty Warzone and you don't want your game to be 200 gigabytes, you'll compress it to be decompressed when it loads in. And a lot of games used to do this just because storage space was limited. Those files are compressed on Switch, and the Switch decompresses them to run so that they can fit on the Switch cart. None of those files are much less compressed on the Wii U. Like, the game is significantly bigger in file size on Wii U. Like, all of the DLC for Breath of the Wild, I think, is 900 megabytes on Switch. It's about 3.5 gigs on Wii U for the exact same data. Just because the CPU couldn't handle it.
It's utilizing the CPU to save storage space, or I guess space in general.
Yeah, because the game was already designed around the Wii U CPU, and then the Switch CPU is slightly stronger. I mean, I don't want to say that hardware is one-to-one, because hardware has different strengths and weaknesses. So that some people are like, why can't this old game run on this new hardware? Especially when it comes to the Switch, and it's like, well, the way this old hardware worked was totally different than the way this new hardware worked, so the thing the old hardware was good at, the new hardware sucks at. Because if you think about it, the Switch's hardware is more comparable to what you get in a phone than what you get in a PC. But with Breath of the Wild, luckily they started that porting process very early in development of the Switch. So they were able to optimize it a lot, and they found they had some extra CPU headroom. And so they decided to use that CPU headroom for data decompression so that they could fit it on a smaller Switch cart. Because there is more raw CPU strength. The game still has frame rate issues on Switch, though. But also, at the same point, even if they didn't compress the data, I'm not sure if that would be enough to deal with Breath of the Wild's frame rate issues. I think the only way I've seen those smoothed out, like not even an overclocked Switch smooths those out. The only way I've seen it run well is emulated on a PC. Which helps that the Wii U is very easy to emulate on a PC as well as the Switch. Because the Wii U uses IBM hardware, like IBM PowerPC hardware. Which is also the same type of hardware that the Wii and the GameCube used. Which means that not only is it very close to hardware you'd run on PCs, but we also know how to emulate it very well.
Yeah.
And the Switch is running, it's running like cell phone ARM chips, which are pretty well documented, and also an NVIDIA GPU, so you don't even necessarily have to emulate the CPU. You just have to convert the calls to the Switch GPU to calls to a real NVIDIA GPU. Like a bigger one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not necessarily one-to-one, but it makes the process much easier. But sometimes console development is complicated because... so have you ever read any of the MCC dev diaries for updates?
A couple.
So...
I've not read, I would say I've skimmed through.
So...
hard for me to keep the attention of reading anything that's somewhat long.
That's fair. I'm also ADHD, so in one of their earlier dev diaries for the PC version of MCC, when they were just porting over Reach, they explained why they had a ton of problems with things. Like why the audio was weird when it first came out. It turns out that the Xbox 360 had a proprietary audio pipeline. It wasn't the same as direct sound. It wasn't the same as OpenAL. Like, it was something that only the 360 had. The Xbox One didn't have it. The original Xbox didn't have it. Only the 360. Beyond that, Bungie also had their own proprietary audio tools and middleware that nobody else used, and they also licensed audio software from an audio engineering company, and they were the only games to ever do that with this specific audio tool. So when it came to reverse engineering the audio for PC, it was a big pain in the ass because even if you could get the audio to play on PC, none of it went through any of the same audio processing as on the original hardware. So, like, they were all the same sounds, but none of them actually sounded the same. Like, the mix was totally wrong, and you were missing effects like reverb. And so it's stuff like that that can be a pain in the ass. Like, that, they didn't fix that for a little while. Like, the audio sounded wonky as hell in PC MCC. It was really easy to notice if you ever did a direct comparison. And it's just weird shit like that that becomes a pain in the ass later, especially if nobody keeps the source code. Which I guess is the main thing that makes porting to consoles easier or hard. Is, did anyone keep the original code and assets? Like, sometimes it can be easy, sometimes it can be a technical challenge, but it's always going to be so much harder if nobody kept the original asset. Which is part of why every Final Fantasy game has shitty ports.
Oh, is that it? They just dropped it?
They lost all of the source code and all of the source assets. The only thing they kept were higher versions of the pre-rendered cutscenes. That's it. They don't have any of the source sound effects, they don't have any of the source models, any of the source textures, any of the source code, none of it.
That's rough.
Yeah. Square did not do a good job of keeping that stuff.
Is that why the FF7 remake took so long? Or were they just redoing everything?
Well, they were redoing everything, but keeping the source assets sometimes can help. So, did you ever play any of the Oddworld games?
I've watched through a lot of them.
So, Oddworld New and Tasty, the remake of Abe's Odyssey, one of the reasons they were able to do that on an indie game budget is because Oddworld actually has kept 100% of everything. Everything has been archived. All of the concept art sketches, all of the original models and textures, all of the audio files, everything has been kept.
Makes sense to do.
Yeah, it's something that Lauren Lanning was very passionate about when they opened Oddworld Inhabitants. Like, he's like, we can't lose this stuff. Including the original matte paintings that are scanned in for some of the backgrounds. Because he actually started in the film industry as a matte painter.
Oh.
And so he took some of his film techniques and applied them to games, which is why the cutscenes look so good for PS1 era for Oddworld, is because it mixes in film techniques like using matte paintings rather than doing everything via CG.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it also made it cheaper for them because they're like, we can only model and render out so many frames. So anything that we don't have to 3D model saves us time. But everything in those games, like all of the assets were, like, at the time, high-res 3D models made on, like, Silicon graphics machines, I think. Like, the same machines that they used to make, like, Jurassic Park. Silicon graphics is dead now. They kept all of those original models, and they export them into sprites that the PlayStation can use. So when they came back to make New and Tasty, those models, they couldn't use them because it was, you know, they were still 1990s pre-rendered CG, but luckily when Silicon Graphics died, they were bought out by Autodesk, and Autodesk Maya can actually still open those old files. So they were able to open those files and then use them as a base to make new assets. So they didn't have to go back and look at screenshots and go, what did this part of the game look like? And squint and guess on details, because they had all of the original models and they could make new models based on that stuff very quickly.
That certainly sounds convenient.
Yeah. Like, you don't have to think about, like, oh my god, how did this look? How should this look? How do I interpret this? They're like, they have all of the original concept art and all of the original models to look at, so when they go to create new assets to run in real time, it's a lot easier. Final Fantasy doesn't have the benefit of any of that. Not only is Square just inefficient in development in general, and also this is one of their... They haven't worked with Unreal Engine that much. They have before. There was a game called The Last Remnant that ran on Unreal Engine 3. But I don't even know if that was handled by the same team. The only other game I know of that runs on Unreal Engine is they ended up putting Kingdom Hearts 3 in Unreal Engine 4. Because after Final Fantasy XV's engine disaster, they were like, we can't do this, we can't keep doing this. Which, it's funny that it took that long, because Final Fantasy XIII was also an engine disaster. Just that it took a million years to develop because of that engine. But yeah, that means that any time that they want to develop an asset for Final Fantasy VII, they have to look at what concept art they have, or look at the game, or just start from scratch. They can't actually go back and look at the original CG in order to base it off of that. Not to mention that it helped that Oddworld New and Tasty was still a side-scrolling cinematic platformer. So they were developing the same type of game. FF7 Remake has, like, nothing similar when it comes to gameplay with the original.
Right, because it's no longer turn-based.
Yeah. Not to mention, like, the perspective is different. You're actually running around in the environments, and it doesn't help that Tetsuya Nomura is doing major story rewrites. So you can't even plan to just remake all of those scenes. They're essentially making a new game with the Final Fantasy VII IP. Like, they don't get to share any of that original stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff you can read. Oddworld documents a lot of that stuff, like Just Add Water, a company that Oddworld used to work with. Like when they brought Much's Odyssey and Stranger's Wrath to new platforms. Just Add Water put out development diaries on, like, here's why this was a pain in the ass. Here's what we had to do this. For some reason, all of the audio for Stranger's Wrath was compressed weird. And we had to find a way to change that. or some like thing where it's like, how the fuck do you get Stranger's Wrath, a game built only for the Xbox, to work with a mouse? The game was never designed around that. Because that's still a pain in the ass sometimes, just because a mouse functions entirely differently. And if you never planned that in development, it can be a pain. Which is also part of why you get so many janky PC ports, is that, you know, if you develop with a mouse in mind, you know, it doesn't matter. With most things in game development, the earlier you start to plan something, the easier it is. Like, even...
Yeah, I understand that they're, like, especially making games, like shooters especially, like, it's just absolutely easier to play a shooter with a mouse and keyboard, just because the aiming is more precise.
Yeah.
And you literally cannot get that precision on a controller. But you know, when you add things like, you know, auto aim and the like, that makes it easier for controller players to sort of bridge that gap. But there are certain games where you just it's almost like impossible to predict that somebody would want to play it with a different form of controller.
Yeah, because, like, there are some console games where you're like, people are gonna play a platformer with a keyboard? What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, or like a racing game with a keyboard.
Yeah, which I've had to do when I don't have a controller and I don't have a fucking steering wheel. Some of those are good and some of those are horrible.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that was part of the problem, is that, like, all of the camera movement and stuff with Stranger's Wrath, you know, it's built with aim assist and acceleration in mind. And an Xbox controller layout. But the other complication with Stranger's Wrath is that it is both a first-person and a third-person game. So it has two separate camera systems that the player can manipulate, with both function differently between a controller. How do you get those both to function seamlessly with a different control set? And also, you know, the control setup, it was like you hold a button to change your weapons. But in PC, you'd expect to use scroll wheel, but you can't use scroll wheel because you don't just cycle through weapons in Stranger's Wrath. You choose which type of ammo you're going to load into the left and right slot. And so you have to start thinking, what do I do about that? Or, you know, if the game was built around character movement with the analog stick, how do you map that onto keys?
Oh, that's like I've been playing Ni no Kuni 2. And I've been using controller. I have to wait until I get a better controller. But, looking at all the controls, you know, it has all the control options for a bunch of shortcuts for mouse and keyboard, and you just can't get those on controller because you don't have 100 some odd buttons.
Yeah, and the same problem exists with controller to PC. I mean, you have two analog sticks that can click as well. You just don't have that on PC. Sometimes you have analog triggers.
I'm trying to think if
or especially if you have a layout with a left stick and then you also use the D-pad for commands, like, you have to think about how you want to map that onto PC.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of PC ports have really awful default key bindings. Like, even Halo's default key bindings are awful.
There was a game mode. I can't remember which one it was that I hadn't changed my key bindings yet, and so I was fumbling around for a while.
Yeah.
You have to change it for every game.
Yeah, I mean, there's another problem also with, like, have you ever played Dead Space on PC?
No, I've only played it once on a friend's Xbox.
Okay, so, like, do you know how you move around differently when you have a weapon out?
Yes.
Like, it moves close to the shoulders? Yeah, on PC, there's mouse acceleration on the camera, but the mouse acceleration amounts are different whether you're aiming down your gun or not.
Oh, that's gross.
Which means you can't even fix it by changing a mouse acceleration slider. So I was thinking this game would work great on PC, which it would. But nobody has ever found out how to fix the mouse acceleration on Dead Space. Like, playing the games on PC with mouse and keyboard is a chore. I somehow finished Dead Space 2 that way. That was the first way I played Dead Space 2. I borrowed it. Do you remember Kimberly from Soda?
Yes.
We were in choir. I don't know if you were in choir. You weren't in choir with me.
Reddish hair? that I'm
Yeah,
thinking of?
reddish, like blondish, like is it like a dirty blonde or a strawberry blonde, I think? Either way. Um yeah, so she had a Dead Space 2 collector's edition that came with like a replica of the plasma cutter,
Yeah.
which was cool, and she lent it to me. And I installed it, which is funny because every time I turned it on, Origin would say, "Activate your copy, bitch, please." And I'd say no, and they'd be like, "Oh, okay, you just can't play multiplayer with the DLC," and I'm like, "That's fine, because the DLC
Yeah.
is just new suits and weapons, which arguably ruins the game balance." So I played through the whole game that way with it yelling at me to activate it on Origin, with a keyboard and mouse, and I didn't get to play it. Like, I think Zach bought me Dead Space 2 on Steam in 2018 because I didn't ever own it until then. I had just played through it entirely borrowing it, and there were so many of that segments of the game that were way harder than they needed to be because of that awful mouse acceleration. Which can also be a pain to tune because sometimes you do want mouse acceleration. But
Yeah, depending on what type of game you're playing.
yeah, but the developers who think that every PC game needs mouse acceleration don't understand. Like, that was mostly useful with ball mice. You know, where you can't move the mice that much.
Yeah, and if you move it too fast, it just messes up.
Yeah, so you need mouse acceleration. But mice haven't been like that for like 20 years.
Yeah, I remember the last ball mouse I ever used was in elementary school, in our computer lab.
Yeah, like I had one and that thing was awful. I hated it. Um. Uh. But yeah, like, Just Add Water, actually not only put out dev diaries for making the game, but I think they put out, like, pretty good patch notes for when they changed things, because when Stranger's Wrath and Munch's Odyssey came to PC, they were both pretty bad. You know, because these were games designed to run very specific hardware a long time ago, and even if you had all the original assets, the other problem is that none of the original tools were around anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how are you supposed to mess with those models or levels or audio assets when whatever company that made middleware or the development tools that you used is gone? And if those don't happen to easily import, that's another thing that could be a huge pain. And they had that pain. And not only that, but, you know, it ran on one specific piece of hardware to however many PC configurations you have, and they had to get it to work with keyboard and mouse. So it took a long time for them to fix up those ports, but they documented everything as they did and put out, like, development diaries. And so they would talk about, like, hey, we know that Stranger's Wrath sucks to play with on a PC and mouse, so we've tried to do this stuff to fix it. And they'll explain, like, we wanted to do this, but then we couldn't do that because of this reason. Or anytime they make a graphical change, because they ended up changing the graphics as well and making them into HD versions.
Yeah.
As they were like, well, we didn't think that the fuzzle model in Stranger's Wrath actually met the concept art, so we made a new model to look closer to the concept art. It's cool. They had a diagram that they used to look at where it showed what the original Stranger model was for his pre-rendered CG and how many polygons it had, and then what his original model was for the Xbox game was, and then what his new model was for let me look it up, for Stranger's Wrath HD. And like they showed you like Wrath Stranger models. Yeah, in Oddworld Inhabitants in 2011, you can see the model comparisons. Yeah, there's a link to it. Oh, this isn't the image I was looking for. But there's one that shows, like... Yeah, so like in the original Xbox game, like in the Stranger's Wrath HD Dev Diary 1 on Oddworld.com, Like, so the original Xbox model was 3,000 polygons. And then they showed how they doubled that in the HD version to 6,000 polygons. But they based it off the CG model, which is 529,000 polygons.
Oh.
Yeah, and they also talk about the problems where, like, we were trying to get the file size down. Because the source assets are, even though the game is 2.1 gigabytes on the original Xbox, they have 30 gigabytes of source assets to work from. And they were talking about how we couldn't develop the game the same way we developed our last game, because if we did it that way, the game would inflate to 66 gigabytes, which obviously you don't want.
Unless you're Treyarch or Activision.
Yeah, unless you're Treyarch or Activision. Imagine if you did that, though, on a freaking PS3 HD remaster of a original Xbox game.
Wow, big games were games over 50 gigs in the PS3 era? I don't think so.
No. I think the one that was Call of Duty Ghosts, and that was a big controversy.
And yet it didn't stop them from going bigger, because if you have both Warzone and Cold War, that's what, almost half a terabyte?
Yeah, it turns out that now you can't even fit both games on a base, like, PS4 500 gigabyte hard drive. Yeah. Like, if you just have the default hard drive, you can't have both of those games installed. And some of that's probably because of duplicate assets or uncompressed assets, or not letting you choose what game modes you want. Like, okay, that's cool that the sound is all pristine and uncompressed, but let's be honest, I'm listening out of my TV speakers, I probably can't tell.
Yeah, my headphones are 8 years old.
Yeah, it's not like I have, like, big-ass studio headphones that, like, cost a $1,000,000. Like, I can deal with some audio compression. That's also why Titanfall, that was another big controversy. On PC, they decided to leave all of the audio uncompressed for the original Titanfall so that it could run on lower-end CPUs, but they didn't let you choose. Like, if you had a higher-end CPU, you can't have the compressed audio. So Titanfall 1 was over 50 gigabytes on PC, but on 360 it could just fit on, like, a 360 disc. And it wasn't that big on Xbox One either. But, like, it's so weird that, like, what they could manage to do with, like, 2 gigabytes or just 700 megabytes. And now it feels like no game is that small unless it's an indie game.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only game I can think of that came close to that file size, okay, there were a few. Metal Gear Solid 4 on PS3 was like 40 gigs. That's because of all the cutscenes, though.
Yeah. Cutscenes have always been pretty good in those games.
Yeah, and that game has more video than any other Metal Gear Solid game. There's a lot of video in that game. And it's at HD quality on a Blu-ray. So, since a Blu-ray can hold like 50 gigs, they decided to fill up most of the disc with video.
Then again, PlayStation was further on than Xbox when it came to, better discs. Like, didn't it go with Blu-ray first, or?
Yeah, Sony went with Blu-ray first, but that created some problems. One, that's why the console was delayed to 2006. And two, that's why it cost $300. I mean $600, other than the other reasons it cost $600, but the Blu-ray was very expensive. And I think it also loaded slightly slower, which is partially why a lot of early PS3 games had to install when they didn't have to install on 360. Like, if you get BioShock on a disc on PS3, you have to sit there for at least 30 minutes while it installs.
Mm-hmm.
And on 360, you put the disc in and just play.
Yeah, I know that's been a thing nowadays where you literally have to install every single game you buy, even if it's physical.
Yeah, but, like, back then it wasn't. And also, it took a lot longer for them to install back then. Because the hard drives and the disk drives are slower. And the CPUs are weaker, so even if you could move data that fast, even if the disk drive is faster and the hard drive is faster, the CPU can only move data so fast. Which is why I'm annoyed whenever people put like an SSD in an iPod. I'm like, one, you're only loading like, what, MP3s, MP4s? Even if you're loading waves, you don't need to move data that fast. And two, the CPU of the iPod literally can't move data that fast. It can't. Mm-hmm. And also, you put it into like an old hard drive connector, so even if the CPU could, and even if you were loading big amounts of data, the interface it's plugged into can't, so why? Someone on the PS3 hacking subreddit also put an SSD in their PS3, and I'm like, literally, why? SSDs also generate more heat and consume more power, so really you just introduced an additional bottleneck. Because you'd need to upgrade a lot more components than just the hard drive to get PS3 games running faster. But yeah, that was an issue. The other thing is that with the Blu-ray, everybody wanted to do HD video on the PS3. Which meant a lot of stuff. So like Final Fantasy XIII had better cutscenes on PS3 than it did on 360 or on the PC port. Because they used a proprietary Sony codec to not only have higher quality video, but it was also 60 FPS video. The same thing happened with Silent Hill 2 on PS2. It had way better cutscenes than any other version, because it used a proprietary Sony codec. Well, if you played it on PC or original Xbox, you got the DivX codec, which was a lot worse. So FF13 was big, I think, because they all put it on one disc instead of 3 discs like 360, and the cutscenes were higher quality. Killzone 3 is actually bigger than Killzone Shadowfall, the PS4 Killzone. Mm-hmm. It fills almost an entire Blu-ray. And the reason for that is that in order to optimize loading as much as possible, they put a ton of copies of every file on the disc. So that whatever section you were in the game, you were close to all of the files that you needed. That way, they could reduce loading times and increase frame rate and do more with the game. But they talked about how like a big part of building Killzone 3 was specifically the data structure of the disc. And how they didn't have to do that with Killzone 4 because the discs could load faster and the game was installed on the hard drive and the CPU was faster and there was more memory. So even though the newer game has higher quality models and higher quality textures and higher quality sound assets when it comes to sound files, and like file size, and the amount of data they hold, it still took up less space on the disk than Killzone 3 because of what Killzone 3 had to do with data optimization. But most games didn't reach that file size because you had to release the game on 360 as well. So, like, if you created a 50 gigabyte game, that'd have to be, like, a ton of DVDs on the Xbox 360. And most games were one-disc games on the 360 until late in development. Like, late in the 360's life, where you'd usually have a game disc and an install disc.
Oh, right. I was trying to think, because I couldn't think of any... I don't think I had any 360 games that required to.
Halo 4 had that. I didn't get... Disc 2, install disc. Well, good.
I don't think I... No, I definitely have 4.
Yeah, I mean, you only touched that disc 2 once. You put it in the first time.
Yeah.
And you never touch it again.
I don't think I beat the campaign in one sitting, because that's what I used to do.
Yeah, Battlefield 3 had install disc. You could choose not to install it. But the game was missing most of its textures if you didn't.
Oh, yeah.
So... pretty much you had to install it. Because it looked and somehow ran worse without the textures, which is weird. Like, the textures were there, but they looked worse than an original Xbox game. Because they were all compressed to hell, like crazy blurry. Grand Theft Auto 5 had that, and you had to install. If you bought the digital-only version on consoles, it didn't work because the game had to load so much data on the 360 and PS3 that it relied on being able to load data from the disk drive and from the hard drive simultaneously, because neither one of them was fast enough alone to load the data for GTA 5 on 360 or PS3. You needed to have the disk in and install on your hard drive, otherwise the game didn't work right. Like, there was this big debacle about how you could buy it digitally on the PS3, and because it couldn't stream data fast enough from the PS3 hard drive, the game basically didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Battlefield 4 must have done that. But no, most of the other multi-disc games on 360 were like JRPGs with cutscenes, and those were a rarity. Like, almost none of those came out. But I remember another game that was a controversy with how big it was is when The Witcher 2 came out on PC. It was like really big. It was like 20-something gigabytes.
Oh, yeah.
And also... Oh, sorry.
No, yeah, I think I... Because isn't The Witcher 1 12?
Yeah, The Witcher 1 Enhanced Edition is like 12 gigabytes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think some of that's because of the breadth of content, and some of that is, I think, also CD Projekt Red isn't necessarily great about optimizing that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, The Witcher is also an interesting game because it gets to a point where, especially, well, for me, where it just sort of bottlenecks with how you can play. Like, I got to this boss, and if you don't do enough up to then, it basically becomes impossible to beat.
Oh,
You're just super good.
that was a big pet peeve I have with games where they put you against a wall and you have no option. Like, Final Fantasy XIII has a hard level cap, and that level cap changes every time you beat a major boss, it goes up. But that means that if you're really stuck on a boss, and you're already at the level cap, you can't level up more to beat that boss. You're fucked.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I never got past one of the bosses in Final Fantasy XIII because of that. Like, I don't like grinding, but I like it there as an option if I feel like I need it.
I need games to can't have just story, and then later on gives you side content to do, or you have to grind to get the story. If you can mix up side content and story, like first of all for just my attention span, but second of all for just being able to move smoothly through the game.
Yeah, just do whatever you're currently feeling like and not feel like you're stuck in one mode.
Yeah, which is with Ni no Kuni 2, I felt that for a bit because you have to do so much story at the beginning, and then you finally get side stories. But once you get then you get a lot of side stuff in Ni no Kuni 2, so it becomes a whole lot easier.
Yeah, I've never actually finished the first Witcher because
I stopped, and even I can't remember how far I got through The Witcher 2 even, just because it got repetitive.
Yeah, I never finished Witcher 1 because I lost my save data moving between computers too many times, so I've started that game like 4 times. And like, it's a slow game. And I was interested in the story, but there's so much to get through to actually get to what's going on. Like, it just feels like sometimes it's like, oh, well, I have to level up, so I have to do all of this stuff, or, oh, well, I have to sit here and craft, like, 30 potions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just felt like I was always doing chores to get to the part of the game I actually wanted to play.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the game would surprise you with, like, I hope you were preparing this way, because this boss is going to kill you unless you do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, I wasn't preparing for that.
That's what happened in Ni no Kuni 2. I got to a certain boss where I was also an issue with my controller not being able to move the way I wanted to, but it also just changed up basically all of the battle mechanics to completely different.
I've had JRPGs that do that just like part way through. They like totally change the mechanics, and you're like, you're gonna do a totally different type of battle, and if you don't know how to do it, you're screwed.
And I got to the point where I almost beat him, and I was playing on the hardest difficulty just because, like, you know what, I kind of want to play a challenging game. So I attempted it. And so I was attempting it, and so I got to the point where I almost beat him, but this was like 6, 7 times getting near to beating him and just dying to some, supposedly BS reason, not really BS. just because I was getting frustrated, so I just lowered him because like I know I can beat this person. I just don't want to put the effort in. So I just lowered it to the easiest difficulty to beat him and then changed it back afterward.
Thank games that let you do that with no penalty, because sometimes I'm like,
The only penalty is I didn't get as much experience or cool stuff. But
who cares?
yeah, I already, I've been grinding that stuff off on normal enemies, and they're hard
Yeah.
enough as it is. So
Persona 4 Golden not only lets you change the combat difficulty for how much damage enemies do and how much health they have, but you can also change the experience yield.
yeah.
Yeah, in case you want to make it more or less grindy.
Oh, that's actually really cool. Instead
Yeah.
of tying experience yield to directly to difficulty.
Yeah, they're two separate sliders. So you can have really hard enemies that give you a lot of experience if you want. Or, if you want to grind a ton, you can make it so that enemies don't give you that much experience so that you have a reason to.
Yeah.
I think you can also maybe adjust the money drop rate, I'm not sure.
I also
But-
do like games where they it's not completely random encounters. You do have some say in what you fight.
Yeah, Persona 4 puts like blobs in the dungeon, and then you can like, if they touch you, you battle, and if they touch you from behind, you're at a disadvantage, and if you smack them, like from behind, you're at an advantage.
Yeah.
The whole game's dungeon system does kind of suck though, and the dungeons are mainly just narrow corridors. But if you know what you're doing, you can just slip past every enemy. There's also items you can get if you don't want encounters that you can buy or farm. But yeah, I also never really played The Witcher 2 because one thing that game was really bad about was that it was like, do you remember that era when games would come out and they'd be like, this game will run on these stats, but it will absolutely positively not run on a fucking laptop? Like, the laptop could be way more powerful, but like the game was written in such a way that it could not run
I do
on
remember
mobile
that era.
hardware.
I don't think I ever experienced it because I never had any good PCs / good laptops. But I do remember like even hearing about not being able to
Yeah.
play certain games.
I wouldn't say my PC was good, but it was pretty competent when playing 360 era games. Could not run The Witcher 2 at all. It was like 5 frames a second with all the settings on low. Which is weird because I felt that the PC was pretty powerful. It wasn't. It's just because of how late we were into the 360 PS3 gen. But it was like, oh my god, it can run every game in a high resolution and a high frame rate with better textures than on console.
Yeah.
Which, was really cool to me because I had never had a PC that could, like, run a game better than a console could. Other than the odd exception of, like, stuff like The Sims.
Yeah, which is why consoles are, attractive to people because they aren't as expensive, and they are made specifically to run certain games.
Yeah,
Instead
like,
of, having to guess at a PC that's more expensive that might not even be able to run a specific type of game.
yeah, there's less hassle, and you also don't have to worry about, like, a console's never going to get, like, an operating system update that'll break a game.
Yeah.
But Windows could do that with old games. And you know that no matter what, if you come back to that console, as long as your console works, that game's going to play that way. Which can also be good for preservation, because there's a lot of good things about PC. But, like... and consoles do get shitty ports, and the thing that sucks about shitty console ports is that if the developers don't fix it, you're fucked. While on PC you might be able to.
Yeah.
But I'd say in general, PC gets a lot more lazy ports.
Isn't the Series X basically just like an emulation machine?
Oh, yeah. So, the Xbox
Heard about
One could actually do this as well,
Oh.
with less hardware power. So, any Xbox One or Series X or S, you can, like, pay a licensing fee of, like, $5 and activate it online and turn it into a development unit. Which means that you don't have to pay Microsoft thousands of dollars for development units, in case you're like an indie studio. Now, this does mean that you can't play like normal retail games on it, and you can't get achievements and stuff. But it does mean that you can run unsigned code on it. which means you can just plop RetroArch on it. I mean, it would mean that you'd have like a dedicated homebrew console. So like you couldn't use that as the same console you're playing Xbox One games on. But yeah, it does mean that you essentially have like a emulation PC in a console form factor.
I can't start it because it says you're idling.
Well, I'm... Okay.
How long do you have your controller down? Like 2
It's in my hands. I was the one who captured the flag.
I know. No, like after the end of that game, it said it kicked you from the session because of somebody idling, or because player in your party idling.
I was playing.
That's dumb.
Well, maybe it was like making fun of us. Like, why is your KD so bad?
Yeah, honestly, I had 5 kills that last game. I got a really cool double kill on like the second game. I didn't want to say anything because you were busy talking, so under my breath I was like, oh, because I like hit a tree that happened to kill. Happened to be next to 2 people with a rocket launcher.
I'm gonna be honest, I feel like I wasn't paying attention to that last match very much. I was just kind of playing mindlessly until like the last minute. I was like, this is capture the flag.
Mm-hmm.
Like my brain kicked in. It's like Vivian, the objective. I always go with Sprint. People complain that Sprint ruined the franchise. I don't think that's true.
People complain that everything ruins every franchise.
They do, especially people who play Halo complain about everything. And they pretend that the Bungie games are perfect. And this is somebody who likes the Bungie games a lot. And doesn't like the 343 games so much. But the Bungie games are not perfect, and Sprint is not what killed the franchise.
No. A lot of things killed the franchise, and there's reason to complain about them, but people seem to be complaining about the wrong things.
Yeah. I also feel like Halo was kind of stuck in a problem where it's like, how many Halo games have we had? 5? 5 games in like 10 years. So like a Halo game every 2 years. Which isn't how it actually played out, but, you know. ODST came out quickly after Halo 3, which was quickly followed by Reach. And the problem becomes like, okay, we've created a formula, but also it's really easy to get samey. And as much as I like the Bungie games and I do replay them endlessly, it's funny to say that I'd get tired of playing the same game over and over again. Because I literally am playing the same game over and over again.
Yeah.
But also, if you're going to drop down $60 on a new game, you have different expectations. And the problem is Halo was really stuck in a formula. I think the other problem...
It was a different formula from other games, but it definitely got samey.
Yeah. I think the other problem is that in order to differentiate the formula, they just started chasing the formula of another popular shooter. They made it more like Call of Duty. They added in kill streaks. In Halo 5, they added in aiming down sights.
Oh, right, Ordnance. I never played any...
Yeah, they tried to add a bunch of stuff like that. Also, like the new armor abilities, like the shield armor ability, nobody uses that shit.
Armor lock seems like the most useful, but I do not know how to use it.
I see people use it well. I can't seem to do it well.
Yeah.
But I was talking about like the shield that Master Chief puts in front of him in Halo 4.
What was that?
In Halo 4, he has that shield he puts in front of him.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, that's useless. That's garbage.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the new weapons kind of sucked. I mean, some of them were nice, but the new weapons weren't that great.
All the Promethean weapons?
Yeah, I mean, because it kind of felt like there's a design language and a mechanical purpose to the human weapons, and the same thing with the Covenant weapons.
Yeah, the Promethean weapons were like, oh, this looks cool. We'll do this.
It didn't feel like there was a reason to add a third faction of weapons. Like, they didn't have a gameplay reason.
You're replacing the battle rifle that they took out.
Yeah, like, everything just feels like a clone of a different weapon.
The bolt pistol, whatever, I think that's what it was called.
The bolt pistol was weird.
Yeah. You could, can you, charge it for a shotgun shot or something?
Which they changed what the charge shot did in Halo 5.
Oh, but then they took out the brute weapons as well.
Yeah, they took out a lot of the brute weapons.
Like the Mauler, the
Yeah, because the brutes didn't show up, and
yeah,
I don't even want to talk about
like
the...
the gosh, I'm trying to remember. I think our team's just self-destructing.
Yeah, I'm probably not helping that.
Well, no, they're just destroying all our vehicles.
Oh, yeah, this person in this tank has been sitting here.
3 of them were standing on a scorpion, not doing anything, and then it just got blown up.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not helping the team because I suck.
I'm also not actively damaging the team on purpose, though. Oh.
I got one of my kills because the person wasn't on me, so.
Sorry, Chihiro wanted in.
Hey, it happened.
I let her in. She in now. Yeah, it just felt like there wasn't a design paradigm, like a reason for them to exist, and they were just clones of weapons. And some of them I liked. Like, I kind of liked the scatter shot. But I'm like...
Yeah. It's a different shotgun, because, you know, there was only one shotgun.
Yeah, it was like a bouncy shotgun, because there's no Covenant shotgun, really. But yeah...
That's why I like the Mauler.
Yeah, because it's the closest thing you can get. It's like a shotgun pistol, which they were maybe trying to replace with a bolt shot, but I don't think anyone uses the bolt shot. Like, everyone's like, the suppressor sucks, and it kind of does. Like, just use a regular assault rifle.
Oh yeah, that assault rifle was awful. The suppressor, sorry.
Or like the binary rifle, like, are we really doing anything that different from the other sniper rifles?
Yeah, it's just a beam rifle.
Yeah. It's just a beam rifle that has less shots. Because maybe it does technically more damage, but the beam rifle is already gonna kill you, so...
I think binary rifle, didn't it always one-shot?
It always one-shot.
Yeah. Because with, like, beam and a regular sniper, any body shots wouldn't kill.
Yeah, it'd usually lower all shields, but it wouldn't kill. Are they gonna get in this vehicle, or are they just gonna stand on it? Another thing is that most of... most of the Prometheans also weren't fun to fight. Like, I liked fighting the crawlers. I loved popping their heads. But the Knights were BS. Like, teleporting anywhere isn't fun. The fact that they can shoot grenades and they're hard to trace isn't fun.
Then you had to re-kill them if you didn't kill them.
Yeah, and the Watchers, I hated fighting those. I hated them. The little bike guys, the floaty boys. Like, they sucked to fight. They could throw grenades. They could shield enemies. They could shoot. They could...
Did they?
They what?
Did Bungie work on 4?
No. Reach was the last one Bungie worked on.
Okay. Because I was thinking, because that is, like, because, you know, they added, didn't some of those things add shields to, they, like, add shields to the Prometheans?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
I think...
so that's just almost like Destiny, where Destiny's enemies get just way too bullet spongy.
Yeah. I mean, I think with Halo 4, it was a problem of making the campaign long and difficult enough with a very short development cycle. Especially with how hard they were trying to push graphical fidelity on the 360. Especially considering that they had worked on Halo Anniversary before that. So I just think they didn't have time, especially since they had to develop then Halo 5 and Master Chief Collection shortly after that. Like, I feel like 343 also got it really unfair from Microsoft. Like, they had no chance doing all of those projects back to back to back to back to back. There's no way that any of that could have worked out. But also just some of their decisions are questionable. I think one of the other things is that with the Covenant, it's pretty easy to tell what weapons they're armed with. Not only can you see them, like, they contrast, like, they fit in with the design language, but they contrast with the individual Covenant.
Yeah, the colors are different from the what the enemies are colored.
Yeah, the colors and the shapes.
Yeah.
But the Promethean stuff, the enemies and the weapons share the same colors and the same shapes. And not only that, but you could tell if a Covenant was going to be more difficult because of their armor design. Even if it was just color in Halo 1, you'd be like, oh, a gold elite? I better watch out for the gold elite. It was very hard to tell whether you were fighting a Promethean knight that had a scatter shot against one that had an incineration cannon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at a distance, you can't tell. At a quick glance, you can't tell.
No.
And I think that was a big problem. I also think that Prometheans are just kind of dumb in concept.
Yeah.
But I think...
Like a cool enemy.
Yeah, like, the Prometheans look kind of neat, I guess. But it's not... The designs aren't as functional, and I don't think they're as inspiring as the Covenant designs. Like, yeah, they look kind of neat, but when every level...
Or is where it's like, oh, it was trying to look cool, but it just didn't work.
Yeah, I feel like they were focusing on how much visual flair individual elements could have, but they didn't really see the broader picture of how they fit together in a composition.
Yeah.
Because some of the individual elements look nice. Like, I love the sound of the scatter shot. Like, the Promethean assault rifle. I actually really like how it sounds.
But yeah, the light rifle was cool.
Yeah. But, like, and I think the floaty bits on the weapons are neat, if unnecessary and stupid.
Yeah, stylistic, but unrealistic. Well, obviously unrealistic.
Yeah. But, like, even if they look flashy, they don't function that well, and beyond that, a lot of the levels just... I mean, there were some good-looking levels, but there were also some levels that really just blended together. Like, any Forerunner level all looked the same. But not only did they look the same, but they were visually hard to read, and they didn't fit in with the old Forerunner design language. Like...
In 4.
Hmm?
I got lost so much in 4.
Yeah.
There were levels where I'd run in a circle for 10 minutes.
You could tell that was a problem too, because 4 gives you way more waypoints than any other franchise in the series, and Cortana talks a lot more. Like, they try and guide you way more. I think the other thing is that, like, looking at the Prometheans, do they seem to fit up with the Forerunner design language at all? Like, these are made by the same people who made the Sentinels.
Yeah, I don't think so, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think they really fit in. I mean, yes, they're angular and metallic, but other than that, it doesn't really kind of fit the broad, stronger shapes that are more easily readable of the Forerunner architecture. And the Forerunner architecture wasn't just white. It was kind of like grays and blues and whites. But also like these mysterious structures that blended in with nature, but a lot of the stuff in Halo 4 was very sterile. Which I find weird because, you know, a lot of these installations, you know, the installation and, like, the natural features were both built at the same time by the same people. So they were meant to mesh together. But it didn't really feel like that in Halo 4. It kind of just felt like there's already a planet here and we plop down a building. Which is kind of how human architecture is, not Forerunner architecture, because they built the land that the structures were on as well. And the other thing is that everything was just light bridges and floating platforms, like everywhere.
It really did get samey.
Yeah, and part of that is because of the short development cycle, like, they had to find ways to artificially lengthen the gameplay, which is something Halo's done before. Like, Halo 1 had you backtrack a lot. Halo 2, I think, is the worst offender. With corridors copy-pasted. Like, there's that one mission where you drive through a tunnel, and that tunnel lasts, like, 20 minutes, and it's the same tunnel. Or, you know, there's the classic you are on a moving platform for 2 years missions. And those weren't really things that I missed about Halo, and not really things I wanted back. Even if some of those individual moments could be fun, they weren't, you know, they weren't the highlights. And at the same time, I felt like a lot of the cinematic moments, like, I didn't care for. Like, some of the stuff was fun. I liked using the Mantis.
Holy crap, I was on a spree.
Oh, fuck. I haven't
I
had
realized I
one.
got killed and it said it ended my spree.
I haven't had one all day. I think one of the other problems holding it back is that I think they should honestly let go of Master Chief.
It would be cool to sort of possibly see a new protagonist.
Yeah, a new or existing protagonist, because we have other characters in the Halo
Tried
universe.
to do that with 5, bringing in the other Spartans.
Yeah, but
But they really, I mean, they did a horrible job.
they did a bad job with the dialogue. I think the thing is with a team of 4 people, you need to have chemistry between them, and they didn't really have that.
Reach was good.
Yeah, Reach and ODST felt like they had more chemistry, which is funny
Yeah, like
because those
I felt
characters,
like I connected with those characters,
yeah,
despite only knowing them briefly.
yeah, and it felt like they knew each other. But
Yeah,
and not only that, but their motivation kind of sucked. Like we told Chief to not go after Cortana, which last time we did that, he went after Cortana and we yelled at him and then didn't get him in trouble.
yeah, that's just a dialogue issue.
And
Right?
so, yeah, and so now he does it again, and we're somehow surprised. Also, the fact that Cortana's even back at all and she's evil. Whatever's going on with that.
Oh no, Cortana turned evil.
Um, it's not like she's been having issues in Halo 3 and 4.
Yeah.
And also somehow she saved you with blue AI and I don't know what the fuck. Nuclear explosion saved because computer lady created a circle around you in space, I guess. I don't know how that works. But like I think their motivation of chasing down Master Chief was questionable. Master Chief's motivation was questionable because like even if the stories aren't necessarily like your motivations for doing things aren't necessarily deep in Halo games, they're at least very clear. It's like we need to stop the Covenant. We have a clear end goal, and then we have clear like it becomes clear why a lot of your intermediate goals are important. Like in every level in Halo 1, you know what you're supposed to do. Like I have to find the silent cartographer, the map room.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have to make sure that the Covenant doesn't get a hold of the keys required to fire the Halo rings. I have to get a hold of those. I have to track down Captain Keyes. Or like in Halo 2, like we need to take down this Scarab. I need, to go take down this Prophet. I don't like you know what you're doing every mission. Even if there are twists and turns in the story, not major ones, but it's clear what you're doing.
A relative, like a same style of like I need to go do this, but it was a different thing.
Yeah.
With like 5, it was we still need to go find Master Chief.
Yeah, it felt like none of your immediate goals ever made sense or lined up with your long-term goals. And beyond that, the motivation for the long-term goals also didn't seem weak. Seem strong. Like
there were just missions where you talked to people.
Yeah, that was so weird. Like it was not fleshed out at all. Or like how many times those colonies were under attack? Like don't you feel like that's way more important than whatever the fuck Master Chief is doing? Like how old is he at this point? Is he really that important?
And he's a super soldier, but
he's a super soldier, but he's like gotta be in his 60s or something. Like, and he's one Spartan. Like you have a functional Spartan program now somehow. I don't know how.
Yeah, didn't Halsey bite the dust?
No, actually, she's still around at the end of Halo 5. She's just lost an arm. She was captured by elite pirates. And they interrogated her for information that she didn't give, so they cut her arm off. And you have to go save her as Master Chief. Which, like... I mean, I guess a lot of Spartan 1 and 2s do have an affection for Halsey, probably due to, Stockholm Syndrome. But Chief has never once shown any interest in Halsey. He's only ever shown interest in Cortana.
Yeah, which is a weird dynamic, by the way.
Yeah, I mean,
let's just not talk about that.
It made sense at first, but it got really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at first it's like, well, of course, he's their companion, and it's the only person he's spent a long period of time with and actually fought in battles with that has, been reliable and stayed by his side and his support. So of course even if he doesn't understand emotions that well because he's completely broken and was built just to fight. It's understandable that he'd have some affection, but the way they went with it, like...
Yeah, they definitely lost the relationship between them making sense for me, and after like 3. Like 3 was pushing it because it was just sort of weird.
Yeah, but 3 was like, Cortana's like, you fucking left me here, what the fuck? I've been hanging out with Gravemind for who knows how long. And she's probably worried that she fucking failed. Chief's like, no, I would never do that to you. But then they had a weird similar dynamic in 4. And it just felt real weird and awkward in 4. Like, not only that, but even if I didn't like it, I understood some of the direction they were going with 4. I'm like, okay, I used to think Halo's story was best for its world building and its lore, and I feel like Halo 4 doesn't have that, but I'm like, well, Halo 4 is starting to flesh out characters a little bit more, so maybe if they go in that direction, that could be better. And then they totally dropped all of that. Like, the performance work is a lot worse in Halo 5. I don't even know what the personality of the new Spartan is. Like, the leader of the team that hunts down Master Chief.
I think his personality is, I have to hunt down Master Chief.
Yeah, his personality is military. Even recasting old characters like Buck, they couldn't recapture that. And it's also weird that he's a Spartan. Yeah, I just felt like if they could have focused on anything else, like the new problems that, humanity has to face against maybe its own rebels or, remaining Covenant or pirates or whatever things they unearth, like, with some other person. Like, we don't even necessarily have to have a big story. Like, there's, like, I think that 343 universe is capable of good storytelling, and I think if you want that, you should play Halo Wars 2. Because it manages to do that pretty well. Halo Wars 2 is pretty good. There's also like a DLC where you play as like an ODST team that's like dropped in whenever shit's going to hell. And so they're kind of always in the middle of stuff. Where I think the real highlight of Halo Wars 2 is there's DLC where you play as the brutes of the Banished. And so you actually get to see what it's like with brutes talking to each other and how they handle things and what their personalities are like.
I mean, that's what I enjoyed. In the earlier games, like hearing the grunts talk.
Yeah, I don't know why they got rid of that. And I was also really interested, I don't know why we never got anything else like playing as the Arbiter. That was one of the best parts of Halo 2's campaign.
He just got cut out.
Oh, sorry.
He just got cut out of the game, basically.
Oh, yeah. Like, he's there, but... I would have liked to have seen more of that. But... yeah, and that DLC, where he plays the Banished, you're on the Ark. And that Covenant cruiser covered in flood crashed on that Ark. And it's still there. Like, even if Gravemind wasn't there, there's still flood there. And the idea is that they're going to salvage stuff from this Covenant cruiser crash site. And none of these brutes, most of these brutes never actually saw the flood in combat. And so they're all convinced that the flood was Covenant propaganda. As you get to hear them talk about what's Covenant propaganda and what's not, and kind of go through their denial and realization that, like, oh no, the flood is real shit, and they reawaken it. And have to fight it. And something that, even if you did fight the flood as the Arbiter in Halo 2, it's kind of interesting, but seeing the Covenant's response to the Flood is on like a larger scale, even if it's not technically the Covenant. And I feel like we could have seen more of that. We could have seen games that went back in time, chose different perspectives, or future games where we're just like not following Chief, because like, let's be honest, Chief's not that interesting of a character. And if we're going to take up a bunch of time with dialogue and cutscenes, we need a more interesting character than Chief.
Yeah, in the first couple of games, you know, he had a purpose. He was doing a specific thing, but it's just being beaten to death.
Yeah, just
and I think that's why, like with the Yakuza series, with Kiryu.
Yeah, it feels
you
like
know, once you hear that, oh, they're getting rid of Kiryu as the main protagonist, you're like, oh, that's iffy. But they do it, and it works in 7, from what I've seen.
Yeah, like I've heard that's really good, and it's partially because like all of the Yakuza games were telling Kiryu's story as he aged, and they felt like they wrapped that story up. They were done with it. Like they had an arc that they were going through. Master Chief hasn't really developed as a character, and he was mainly just there to be badass shooty guy and be the player's point of view. Because all the player knows is, like, I have to shoot stuff. And pretty much that's what Chief knows. Like, everyone tells him what to do. He doesn't even respond on the radio in the older Halo games. Like, people tell him stuff, and he says nothing. Usually Cortana responds, and when Cortana's not with Chief, he never responds on the radio. Because he's kind of like a surrogate for the player.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, he's not a silent protagonist, but I feel like functionally he serves the same role. But once we're going to start introducing a bunch of cutscenes and dialogue, Chief doesn't hold up. And the other problem with that is that it's really hard for Chief to have any chemistry with any other characters. Like, the only strong characters you could have in Halo games with Chief were characters that were strong on their own. It wasn't necessarily their dynamic with Chief. Like, Sergeant Johnson is always who he is, no matter who he's around, which he doesn't have very much depth as a character, but he also doesn't have a lot of screen time, so he doesn't necessarily need it.
Yeah, but he is a memorable character.
Yeah, but he's not memorable because of his interactions with Chief. I mean, he has a few of them. But, you know, it's mostly just the kind of interactions you'd have with, like, a dangerous, reckless hero. It's not specifically with Chief's personality. I'm gonna die.
Oh, don't worry, I've been doing enough of that.
Like, I'm not super attached to Chief as a character. We can move on from him.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how Half-Life was planning. Originally, the plan for Half-Life 2 Episode 3 is that they were going to kill Gordon Freeman. Because Gordon Freeman is kind of their introduction to the world, but now that they're moving on and doing more character-driven stuff, he's kind of outlived his purpose. And the more you do the crazy action man who somehow manages to do everything, the more absurd it seems over time. And you can really only have so many character interactions with Silent Dude as he accomplishes multiple tasks. And it can become harder and harder to get the characters to emote in a natural way to someone who never responds to them. So the plan was to kill Gordon Freeman and make Alex Vance the new protagonist.
Which they almost did with Alex.
Yeah, Alex is a prequel, but, like, still, yeah, like, they had decided that they had outgrown Gordon, and he doesn't necessarily need to be there because Gordon's not that interesting of a person, and he's there to, you know, let you connect with the world. But once you're already connected with it, it just kind of seems hollow. Especially if you're doing character-driven stuff, which Half-Life 1 wasn't doing so much of, but Half-Life 2 was doing increasingly more of. So they wanted to do away with them. And I feel like Halo needs to do the same thing if they want to keep doing character-driven games. And even then, like, it's kind of weird, but, like, silent protagonists can have personalities. And out of Halo's silent protagonists, I feel like Chief has the least. Like, Noble 6, people feel is distinct from Chief. And the Rookie they feel is distinct from Chief.
30 seconds remaining.
And so it kind of also makes it difficult to feel any tension about what's going on when it's like, oh yes, I'm Invincible Action Man who's already defeated the Covenant and the Flood.
Yeah, I think that's also like other games that have done that, like with Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
BJ Blazkowicz.
Yeah,
Sort of like
Wolfenstein.
that, and then Duke Nukem, which is, I mean, that is just his character, but
But instead of saying, yeah, Duke Nukem, it's, oh, Duke Nukem.
mhm.
Which I think is kind of funny as much as that game sucks. But I think Wolfenstein did a really good job doing that and also recontextualizing the previous Wolfenstein games. And I feel like they also, I mean, let's be honest, they didn't deal with the Nazi thing as good as a game could. But for a franchise that has never really dealt with the whole, oh my god, the Nazis actually did horrible shit thing, and for a game that has, you know, a freaking Nazi base on Venus and robot dogs and stuff, I feel like it does a pretty good job of actually dealing with that and going like, we're not fighting the Nazis because they have this uniform, we're fighting these Nazis because, like, you have to remember, they're super into eugenics.
Yeah, no, they do bring that up
Yeah, they bring that up a lot.
very well.
Yeah. Which the previous Wolfenstein games never did, and I feel like somehow that game manages to find the balance between serious drama and, like, somber reminders of what the Nazis are doing, and also just stupid, dumb action. Like, I don't know how they managed to strike that balance. And honestly, I feel like those Wolfenstein games are underrated. Like, everyone was like, Doom 2016 is so great, and I'm like, God, did you play... I mean, it is great, but did you play those Wolfenstein games, though?
Yeah, I just from watching them, because you know, most games I watch instead of play, just because I don't like spending money on a bunch of games.
That's fair.
But you know, a lot of these games that I watch, I'm like, that's a game that I would enjoy if I were to buy it, and I feel like that's definitely one of them.
Yeah. Which also makes me feel weird that they went all in with the lore on Doom Eternal. They talked way more about the story in the game, and I'm like, I'm gonna be honest, nobody cares. Like, if you want to go in on the story, let Wolfenstein be the story one. I am totally okay if I just rip people apart in Doom.
Yeah, Doom really doesn't need a plot.
I mean,
Because there's no moral obligation to be. I mean, because you know it's demons.
Yeah,
it's nondescript, you know.
Yeah, you don't need to.
It's not like an allegory to anything. It's just literal something evil.
Yeah, because I mean, Doom Eternal specifically is an allegory, but I don't need one. You know, like, you don't need to convince me to kill demons. And like, you told me why.
Yeah,
UAC is an evil corporation.
Kill Nazis either; they're evil people. But
yeah, but
it's still the moral obligation of them being a human being at some point coming into some sort of question.
And I feel like you need to talk more about that because, like, with Wolfenstein, like, yes, you can just tell me to kill Nazis, but also, like, you're not only dealing with humans, but you're also dealing with something inspired by a real horrific historical event.
Yeah.
But Doom is literally just like, you're on Mars, kill demons, and I'm like, okay, sure. Like, even the story heaviest Doom, like, well, maybe Doom Eternal is more story heavy, but Doom 3, most of the story wasn't, like, deep lore. It was mainly just like, yo, the lights are flickering, what's up with that? Hey, could we increase the safety budget? Yeah, a patient tried to stab me. I think he's turning into a demon. I'm scared. Like, most of those logs are like, yeah, we're gonna die down here. Anyways, the locker code is... I mean, I like Doom 3. It helps that I didn't play Doom 1 and Doom 2 when I first played Doom 3. So, like, if you were expecting Doom 1 and Doom 2, I can see why it gets a bad rap. Especially since it does have that problem of being bogged down with logs. But I feel like those are at least giving you, like, puzzle solutions and stuff. And it helps that I like the type of shooter that Doom 3 is. Like, I like that era of shooters. But I'm also going to say that's not what we need to return to. Like, we don't need that story, especially since that made more sense in Doom 3 because it was a slower-paced game. Doom Eternal is not a slower-paced game. It's a faster-paced game that expects even more skill from you. I want to focus on nothing but what I'm doing. I honestly do not care why the demons are doing what they're doing. They're demons. As far as I care, they might not even have a motivation. And I don't know why they're spending so much time on that. Yeah, Chief needs to go. I don't care if they kill him or not, honestly. Even if they don't, like if they use him for cameo appearances, that's okay.
They did that well in Yakuza.
Yeah. Or like even Yakuza does a good job of despite how absurd it is, Yakuza does a good job of humanizing like even Majima. Which like he's something else.
But even the bad guys, some of the bad guys, it's you know, you can see that change of heart at the end. Or that regret for what they did.
Yeah.
Where when you have a person in a mask, no face, no humanity, just a killing machine, you know, with a monotone voice, how do you show humanity in that without doing the same thing over and over again to where it gets boring?
Yeah, and I felt like they were starting to do an exploration of that, but they didn't continue to do that. Like, I thought maybe they're going to talk about how the Spartan program is messed up because they never actually talk about that. Or about what it does to a person. Or, you know, if Chief was going to be a rebel because he suddenly realizes, oh, the UNSC is actually not a good force.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the Covenant also isn't a good force. And, you know, I was created to suppress rebellion. But they don't do any of that. Instead, it kind of feels like a Saturday morning cartoon. It feels like I'm playing G.I. Joe. Like, all of these random soldiers are just like, look, we got bad guys.
Yeah, I feel like the character should be closer to played like Doom. But it's trying to tell more of a story.
Yeah. We either need to ramp up the absurdity and the action, or, you know, the mystery, which is something that I feel like Halo kind of misses now.
They had that sort of with between Dead Space 1 and 2, right?
Yeah, Dead Space had like a big shift in how the character was.
Dead Space 1, no player character voice acting.
Yeah, Isaac.
2, a whole lot of acting.
Yeah, Isaac didn't really talk in Dead Space 1, and he did talk in Dead Space 2, but I felt like that was a good change. Because, one, you're already familiar with this stuff.
Because it was a character you wanted to... oh gosh, it's been years since I've played this map.
Yeah, I used to play this so much.
Yeah. But because, you know, it's been...
It's been time, you've been through there. And Dead Space 2 is also a little more action-oriented. Mm-hmm. But I feel like part of it is that in Dead Space 1, it was just Isaac's co-workers, you know? Like, you don't necessarily want them to die.
Yeah.
And you care about them, but your relationship's professional. But in Dead Space 2, they wanted there to be a higher depth of interaction.
With the fact that it's literally your wife.
Yeah.
Wife, girlfriend? Can't remember.
Well, the wife is the dead one.
Yeah.
And then they kind of like imply a girlfriend thing. It's like...
And then they just ruin her in 3, right?
Yeah. 3 was interesting.
It becomes self-sufficient. It goes from self-sufficient female character to I need Isaac sort of character.
Ah, yes. The Metroid Other M transition. I've never actually finished Dead Space 3. That would be a fun co-stream to do. If you happen to own it.
I mean, is it on PC?
Yeah, it's on Origin. Wait, it got a Steam release also. Like, it's the same as the other EA Steam releases where it opens through Origin. But yeah, you can get it on Steam now. I still have it just on Origin, but since it's on Origin anyways, we can still play together as long as we friend each other there.
Oh, okay. That's something I would do. I mean, I haven't played, or except for the small bit I played with my friend, or my friend's Dead Space. I haven't played Dead Space at all, so I don't know if that's something you'll be hesitant to do, but...
Nah, I'm fine either way. And if you want to play through Dead Space 1 and 2 first, you can. They're also on Steam and on Origin. And if you want, I could maybe let you borrow my Origin account for 1 and 2 if you want to play them that way. If you have an Xbox... Oh, you don't have an Xbox One, because I was going to say they're backwards compatible. But you still have a 360. You can get copies pretty cheap.
Yeah, I need to make sure it works. I clean out the dust and all that, because it overheats super quickly.
Yeah. I need to clean out the dust on the PS4. That thing is a jet engine, and the UI doesn't respond well. Just because of where it's stored, how many cats we have. A lot of cat hair getting in things. But yeah, I'd be up to do that. I'm like, weird, janky co-op games. Perfect stream stuff. Like, have you ever played Fear 3?
I have not, but I have definitely seen it enough to know that it is a fun multiplayer game.
Yeah, so like, Matt Harrigus from like Soda, I played both Dead Space 3 and Fear 3 with him. We finished neither, but those were both hilarious. There was a time where we were playing where there's a cutscene where one of the characters jumps on the other characters to save him from being shot. But the thing is that the game, the elements can sometimes differ between the two players. You're not perfectly synced at all times.
Oh yeah.
So on Matt's screen, they kept shooting one of the characters. Like, the AI didn't stop shooting during the cutscene. And they shot Isaac until his torso popped off and he was just legs, but his legs were still doing the cutscene animation, so the pair of legs ran and jumped and tackled the other guy to save him.
No, that's totally something I'm down for. I really want to get into more co-op or multiplayer games, because it's just never something I did, you know, with some form of social anxiety. Obviously not diagnosed, but where I just don't like doing things out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, I just also have that issue where, like, I want to socialize with people, but then the thought of actually doing it is difficult.
Yeah, so many times it was just like, you know, you could just boot up a multiplayer game and talk to the people playing, but then there's the whole, like, people are awful human beings, and a lot of these multiplayer games, unless you're playing in, even in casual lobbies, they get super try-hardy. And I'm just here to have a good time, because I am not good.
Yeah, but even me, when I'm like, I should reach out to my friends and ask them to play something, and then I just don't.
Oh yeah, true. Same with me. I don't want to bother them, and I don't have a large catalog of things I can play.
Yeah, I mean,
all of my games are single player.
Yeah, I mean, if it helps, you can go through my GOG library and see if there's anything multiplayer on there, since that's DRM free.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that, we can both play those at the same time. But also, like,
I looked through a little bit of that.
Yeah, it's updated since then. I put more on there. Are you getting just a black screen? Oh, it's finally loading for me. Oh no, it's Halo 1 multiplayer. I have never played this map.
Yeah, I don't recognize this map at all.
That immediately got lit on fire by an ally. Why are the sound effects way quieter for me in Halo 1?
I think it might be unoptimized.
You know,
it's also quiet for me too.
I remember being upset when Halo Anniversary came out. I mean, one, because I think Halo Anniversary doesn't look good. And it doesn't look true to the original game's design. At least I think. I think, like, even if the assets are nicer, I think the design language doesn't match up. But I remember being upset that it was just included for multiplayer a map pack for Reach instead of Halo 1's multiplayer, because I remember liking Halo 1's multiplayer. But then I realized I liked Halo 1's multiplayer as a kid playing couch co-op with my friends. Actually playing it online where everybody just pistol kills you from across the map. Horrific. Yeah. No wonder they didn't bring it back. like actually playing it Master Chief Collection. Like I'm glad it's playable for people who like it or for for historical preservation reasons. But actually playing Halo 1 multiplayer kind of sucks.
Yeah, I just tried to jump and it's...
Like it feels like you move so slow. Which, for the campaign in Halo 1, that makes sense, because it's kind of like, what's all this alien shit I'm exploring, and it makes the world seem huge. That's also why they put the reticle a little lower than center in Halo games. By default.
so you can see higher.
Yeah.
Because people do not look up in games.
Yeah, but in Halo, they have a bunch of structures that point upwards, to make you look up, and if they move that reticle, it feels like you're getting more of that scale. Because, yeah, that's like number 1 rule of game design, people don't look up. Number 2 rule is people don't look at their feet unless they're trying to jump.
I'm not getting gunshot sounds. Every other pistol shot is not playing.
Yeah,
there we go.
Is this a new
might have
bug?
Been where, actually, is it because we're in space?
Oh my god. Are we in space?
Are we?
No, we're on the ring.
Tested.
We're on the ring, it's just night.
Okay. No, yeah, it might have been just because I thought it was outside.
Yeah, no, I think they introduced some new bugs with the latest update that they're gonna fix. The new update, by the way, I mean, one, it's adding new cosmetic equipment. They're adding equipment you can attach to your back for Halo 3. Like, you can attach, like, a katana to your back even if you're not wearing the Hayabusa armor.
I saw that. It's a thing you can just get, or you can just put on your... customize a character.
Yeah, but they're also adding the custom lobby browser for like custom servers, which is the part I'm excited about. Like custom lobbies, yes, because like you can sort of do that, but like posting it publicly, a pain in the ass,
Mm-hmm.
But this means that like playing wacky forage modes is gonna be easier than ever. I'll get in. Oh, Reagan Bush 84680 killed me.
I wonder if they're Republican.
Yeah, I wonder. Looks.
Oh my gosh, there's a whole part of the map I didn't even know existed. What are those?
Where did this map come from? Was this a new map? Was this a Halo? This must have been a Halo PC map. But I played Halo PC multiplayer. I don't remember this map ever. There's no way they made a new map, though. And Halo 1 had no map packs, other than the maps that came in Halo Custom Edition and Halo PC, but those aren't really map packs so much as a new version of the game had new maps.
I do love this pistol, though.
I love the pistol, it's so not bouncer multiplayer. Yeah, I remember being angry about all the weapon changes in Halo 2 when it first came out. I mean, partially because I've told the story before about how I could only play Halo at a friend's house, and their friend's dad said I couldn't play Halo 2 until I beat Halo 1 on Legendary. And as an elementary schooler, that was not a task I could accomplish, but it is a task I tried. And so when I finally played it at a different friend's house in 2006, I was really disappointed. I didn't like a lot of the weapon changes. I mean, one, because I thought, oh, the lore, why would they change it? Which is so dumb. I mean, you can hold the game back by doing that. But two, well, a lot of those changes were right for multiplayer. Like, a lot of those changes were the right change. Like, the pistol was way too strong. I like health, but it does kind of change the pace of multiplayer.
Very true.
Like, a lot of the weapons changes, like making the plasma pistol drain when you held the shot to stop people from camping around corners to insta-drain your shields.
Oh yeah, I don't think I ever played with the plasma pistol before that happened, so that was always normal for me.
Yeah, it used to be you could hold it at full charge forever and the battery would never drain. Yeah, I don't know why it's so quiet.
Sorry, my puppy came in.
You're okay. I think this map kind of looks neat. It's kind of weird because like it's like it reminds you of some of the Halo 1 levels, but it's definitely bespoke. Like, this is not just ripped out of a Halo 1 level. I think it looks really neat. I think this map would be better with more Banshees. I mean, there are some Banshees, but I feel
I've
like
only seen like 2 Banshees flying.
there should be easier access to
Non-concurrently.
Banshees.
But this map is too big currently for
Oh, it's way too big for how slow you move.
yeah.
I mean, it would help maybe if our team coordinated and didn't just destroy all the vehicles.
Yeah, no, that was super fun.
I feel like that's also a general problem with Halo 1 maps, is a lot of them are way too big.
Yeah.
Which is weird because I'm like, I like big maps, but I'm like, is not encountering anyone fun? I mean, Halo Reach has some really big maps as well, but Halo Reach also has a lot more options for momentum. You can sprint. Okay then. Just watch this guy team kill this other guy. I feel like the movement speed and vehicle speed is faster. There's way more vehicles. Reagan, that's not even Reagan. Our team is just team killing each other. I'm like, is that Reagan Bush? Is that Reagan Bush? No, these are 3 different people who are team killing.
What the hell just happened?
I mean, it makes sense that these maps are kind of messy. And they clearly learned a lot. Sorry, I keep having stuff stuck in my throat. That makes me cough, but the coughing isn't helping. But I can't stop coughing. I could not get that. That Banshee was drifting towards the ledge, and I was trying to correct it, and it would not correct.
The vehicle skins are hilarious. Like I jumped into a bright green ghost and it turns to purple.
Yeah, because the way they had to implement them.
Yeah.
It's so funny. The skins are dumb.
I'm kind of okay with the weapon skins. It's although seeing them on the ground, it makes it more difficult to figure out which gun is which.
Yeah. I mean, you can still turn them off, though, if you don't like them, which I think is neat.
Yeah. But I kind of like the weapon skins.
Yeah.
They're not horrible.
They're a fun novelty. I think
the vehicle skins are pretty funny, though.
I think the main reason I didn't like them in Halo 5 is because they were tied to a microtransaction system.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like, even in Halo 5, I used that pizza assault rifle skin. One thing I did like about Halo 5 that I think was ruined by the microtransactions was that multiplayer mode. What was it called? It was kind of like Firefight, but they were 2 opposing human teams. Like, you would capture bases for points, but you would also kill Covenant and Prometheans for points that would drop down. And sometimes it'd be like, oh, there's a boss dropping down, you gotta kill it. Whoever kills it, whichever team kills it gets the points.
I can't recall. I don't think I've watched any Halo 5 multiplayer stuff.
It's an interesting game mode, and I really love the idea of it, because it's a mix of Firefight and of PvP. And it makes huge maps actually make sense. Like, there's a reason to have a map that huge. Because you have 2 big teams and a lot of bases to capture and a lot of spots for enemies to drop. But the thing that ruined it is that you'd open those card packs that you'd either pay for or you'd get via experience. And those card packs would include like a vehicle or something. And in that multiplayer mode, you could spend points to use up that card to summon a Warthog like 1 time.
Gross.
And that was the main way you got a hold of powerful weapons and powerful vehicles. Which often meant that the team that won, it wouldn't just be who was the better players, but who had better cards, and the best way to get better cards was to spend money. Because you couldn't buy a card individually, but you could buy card packs, and if you bought more expensive card packs, you had a better chance of getting rare equipment, and that would also mean that you could get super-powered weapons or super-powered vehicles.
Was that before or after Star Wars Battlefront basically had a pay-to-win, the literal pay-to-win?
This was even before. Microsoft was actually really bad about microtransactions at the beginning of the generation. Like Forza 6 on the Xbox One most of the cars were DLC, and a lot of them are really expensive. Like, there were some cars in Forza 6 that cost $60.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to get one car. The cost of the game.
This Banshee is just hanging off the edge. You see it?
Love it. Oh my god, can I get in it? I can't.
I'll save it.
Goodbye.
It didn't work. And I'm gonna fall for 8 seconds because there's no floor.
Yeah, did you fall
I
far
just
enough to where
fell
you...
past the Banshee. How did I fall faster than the Banshee?
Screw aerodynamics. Did you, when you fall far enough, do you start just rapidly flashing?
Underneath? No, you just keep falling.
Oh, I kept falling, and then while I was falling, my character started rapidly flashing.
Oh.
Like it was like I was there in one frame and not there in the next, and then there in the next after that. I don't know
I had
why.
a box disappear when I scoped in. Not during this game, but...
Yeah, that's always weird when LODs do that, because, like, you expect when you zoom out it'll go away, but that there's some stuff that, like...
And it didn't stay disappeared. I, like, shimmied forward and back, and it reappeared, and then did disappear again. It was just weird.
Yeah, LODs are weird. That's also one of the main ways that, games can optimize asset streaming, is that, previously most LODs would be manually placed. Like, you would have to manually tag an asset with, like, okay, if you're in this range, load in this version of the asset. And nowadays you can automate a lot of that, and also auto-detect if geometry is behind other geometry, to a certain degree. There's actually a new paper by NVIDIA about using ray tracing to not do ray-traced lighting, but instead to help in traditional graphics rendering by using ray tracing to determine if an object is visible or not, and then using that to feed into the culling algorithm.
Yeah.
So instead of generating lighting info, you just trace rays and then decide what you need to render or not to only render what's visible. Which would also mean that the rasterization part of your GPU doesn't have to worry about what needs to be culled or not. It's since the ray tracing cores on the RTX series are separate hardware.
Okay, cool spawn. I got ran over immediately. Wasn't there a game, I cannot remember, it was a crappy game I was watching this person play, where when you zoomed in, it literally just moved your character?
Oh my god.
It moved your character to, like, the equivalent to where you zoomed in.
What
or, like, the camera, instead of actually zooming or whatever.
Oh my god, that must
Like,
be a horrible engine limitation.
And it, like, pivoted around something. The camera, like, pivoted differently whenever you zoomed in.
Oh, do you think it just changed the FOV?
I don't think so. Like, it literally, like, your character was actually there, but what your character saw was literally, like, thrust forward, so it loaded more stuff in, and then it pivoted weirdly around the camera. I can't remember if it inverted it or something weird. I don't remember. It was some crappy game some person was playing.
That's so weird. Yeah, it must have been some weird technical limitation where that's the only way they could find out how to make zooming.
Yeah. That was a extremely boring game.
I've played a game where they just, in order to zoom, they just crop the camera.
Oh, I was trying to remember there was something weird. Chaos Halo. Where the floppy sniper rifle where it zooms in one time. So.
Oh, yeah. Cursed Halo. I love Cursed Halo.
Oh yeah, that's it, Cursed Halo.
If I could get people together for that, for a multiplayer session, I totally would. Like, get like 8 people together for a 4v4.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I've been eating almonds, but they're like flavored almonds.
Yeah.
So they have stuff on them, so there's powder on them, and that powder is stuck in the back of my throat. and I can't get it out. So I just keep coughing, and it's not helping. And I'm like drinking like water.
Have you tried
And it's
not
not
eating
helping.
almonds?
No, I need the protein from nuts. I need it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I need that protein.
I need to find proper ways to get better nutrients in me because the majority of vegetables I can't eat.
Yeah. You know what I got? So you know how I can't eat fruit?
Yeah, you have Oh my gosh, my cousin kicked my ass on this map over and over again, and it looks so much worse than it did back then.
I just keep getting a black screen until later. I don't know why.
It's because we got kicked out.
We got kicked out?
I got kicked out.
Oh my, yeah, it shows it's just me. Oh yeah, Sidewinder was always the Halo 1 map I'd play. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, that was probably my internet. It flickers every once in a while probably because our house is garbage.
Probably. Well, I can look through season unlocks.
I should be good to go again.
Okay, let me rejoin you.
Yeah.
Zach is playing Titanfall 2 again. So proud of him.
You still good with everything? I might take off Reach because it's boring.
Yeah, you can take off anything you want. I'm just gonna unlock season rewards.
Alright, I mean that should be everything.
I have one more season point to spend. What do I want to spend
How'd I
it
get
on?
8?
You must have completed challenges?
Oh, I have been completing some challenges, that's right. I mean, do I even want anything? I'll get some pants.
What's annoying is that the little blips for like, you have a new customization option. They pop up individually for each platform. So like if you looked at that shit on PC, if you go to console, it's there again. It says you haven't looked at it.
Oh gosh,
Yeah, it might even be between two PCs, I'm not sure, but it's super annoying. Cause like I hate leaving those things there.
Mm-hmm. If they're well hidden enough, it doesn't bother me. Like if I have to go into 2 menus to see an exclamation point or whatever, then it's not that big of a deal. But if it's just like, you know, something consistently in the corner saying like, hey, you should check this, blah blah blah, I need to get rid of it.
Yeah, because I'm like, I'm not even necessarily unlocking the stuff because I want it. I'm unlocking the stuff to get to the stuff that I want.
Mm-hmm.
Playing Halo 2 Anniversary is weird since it has newer graphics. It makes me think it's like Halo 4 or 5. And so I think, oh yes, I'll hold this button to sprint, and then I'm suddenly reminded, oh right, this is Halo 2. It's really weird. I also feel like the graphics remastering was unnecessary, but maybe it's because I think like Halo 2 I think has like really bad. I feel like Halo 2 looks worse than Halo 1 in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Partially due to its.
Is that because you're used to Anniversary?
Oh, I'm used.
Anniversary?
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No. Say what you want to say.
I couldn't remember if Anniversary came out after 2.
Yeah. Halo 1 Anniversary came out after before Halo 2 Anniversary came out.
Also, I just got 3 kills.
But oh my god, with what?
Beam rifle.
Oh shit. I'm just looking. I was like hoping someone will get in a vehicle with me. Oh, there you are. I'm driving up to you.
Oh my gosh, the game just lagged. Want me to drive or do you wanna?
I'm already driving, so oh. Well, we're screwed. Yep.
Hey, I got a kill.
Neato. I just feel like Halo 2's original one. I think Halo 2 Remastered looks better than Halo 1 Remastered.
Oh,
I think
is that Halo 2 pistol?
Yeah, it's horrible.
Ugh. I mean, I
Yeah,
understand getting rid of the scope, but it just...
yeah, it just sucks. Like, it doesn't feel good to fire, it does no damage. Like, I was so angry about the Halo 2
gonna
pistol.
die, so I give them weapons. I know
Which,
there's easier ways, but...
which, like, the Halo 2 pistol is probably the worst pistol in the whole series. Like, it just sucks. Like, I know they needed to nerf it, but they nerfed it too much.
I feel like majority of like every single company does that when it comes to nerfing something that, you know, it feels like it's a staple, but it needs to be gotten rid of. That they just, especially if it's like the first time they have to do it.
Yeah. I think the thing that didn't help was dual wielding. So they had to extra nerf it because they're like, fuck, you can hold two. But yeah, doesn't that happen every time a Call of Duty comes out? People freak the fuck out. Because, like,
Yeah,
whatever worked in the last one is nerfed now.
They'll nerf a weapon, and then they'll just add in a new weapon that's just as bad.
But I'm also like, yeah, of course they're making changes. Like, Call of Duty fans literally want to spend $60 to get the same game.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever they get something different, they're angry. And whenever they get the same thing, they're angry. I don't know what they want. I mean, I guess Halo fans are similar.
Yeah. And the problem with Halo fans is that they don't get a new game often enough.
But every time they do get a new game, they bitch about it, myself included. I mean, do you remember when Reach came out? Everyone hated Reach and they thought it was the worst Halo game. And now, if you go around, everyone's like, Reach was the best. It happens every time a new Halo game comes out. Everyone says it's the worst one, and then years pass, the next game comes out, and they're like, you know, maybe the last one wasn't so bad. Like, every time. And I remember some of the complaints were like, somebody said that, like, the point system in Halo Reach, where you unlocked new armor, they said that it meant that your rank doesn't matter and it means nothing. And it's basically useless, and I'm like, there's still the skill-based matchmaking ranks, though, that are separate.
Yeah. That
you still earn the old way. So I didn't see the problem. But I remember people making memes about that and being so pissed. And people deciding that armor abilities ruin the franchise. And people deciding that the DMR ruined the franchise. Everything's ruined the franchise. And then Halo 4 comes out and everyone's like, I miss you. I miss you, babe. Babe, come back.
Okay.
I've changed, I swear.
The Ghost is good in 2.
The Ghost is good. Have you seen the Gun Goose that's in Halo 2 Anniversary? It's a mongoose with 2 assault rifles strapped on it.
Really?
Yes, it's only in Halo 2 Anniversary multiplayer. Yeah. Let me see if I can find you. I'm looking for your name. Where is it? Okay, I see you. Let's see if I can make it to you. Yeah. Okay. I died, but I got to show you. Unless you didn't see.
I sort of saw.
Well, shit. Either way, you can shoot the mongoose and it doesn't honk. And I like the Gun Goose, and I want it in more games.
Yeah, the mongoose is kind of cool.
I feel like the mongoose is mainly useful for, like
I
really...
understand player transportation. It's fast, but is it even that much faster than the
Well, I think it's faster, but it's also more agile. I think it makes sharp turns better, and it can fit through narrower spaces, and it has a smaller hitbox.
Why does the SMG have a scope?
I don't know. Wait, what?
The SMG has a scope.
What the fuck, why? Also, the SMG is definitely one of those weapons that was introduced and overpowered in Halo 2. I mean, so is the battle rifle.
It was super overpowered, dual-wielded in 3, I would want to say.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that I understand why Reach removed the battle rifle.
Okay using it.
Because a lot of Halo multiplayer, Life Sad... Somebody just entered chat, typed in, Life Sad, wife dead, have cancer, kill self. and then they left. That's the only chat that I've had this entire stream. That's it.
Oh, on your Twitch chat.
Yeah, on my Twitch chat. Yeah, are you sure it's not just the binoculars?
No, it has a scoped reticle.
Oh my god. I understand why they had to remove the battle rifle, because most Halo 2 multiplayer and Halo 3 multiplayer was just battle rifle all the time. And you want... Like, you want to do something to change that?
And it was just DMR the whole time.
Yeah, like, they solved the problem with the same problem, is the issue. I do think the DMR made for good SWAT. Like, I liked playing SWAT in Halo Reach. But yeah, in Halo 5, they replaced... The battle rifle exists, but most of the competitive modes in Halo 5 are pistol only. They only let you use the pistol in a lot of Halo 5 competitive modes. Which is ludicrous. I mean, the pistol is definitely better than the Halo 2 pistol, but I'm like, why? Why does competitive need to have no weapon composition choices?
Yeah, no, that's why I took Reach off, because Reach is always
It's DMR
boring.
all the time. And like, other Halo games are battle rifle all the time, which is still annoying. But you're right, there's a scope on the SMG.
I enjoy the battle rifle more than the DMR.
Yeah, me too. The battle rifle feels better. Yeah, why... the normal battle rifle doesn't have this. Is this just a Halo 2 anniversary thing? That's so weird. Like, it even has, like, a sight on it. Like, a physical sight. That's so weird. I've never seen that before. Yeah, because if I have this SMG doesn't have a physical sight on it, and it doesn't scope. It's just binoculars, so it's just that variant. That's...
Yeah, because this SMG I have has a...
Yeah. I had that SMG, and then I died, and now I have the normal one.
I've only gotten this SMG.
That's so weird. Why would you want a scope on an SMG? What are you gonna do?
360 no scope, empty 60 rounds into somebody from across the map.
No scope, 360 spray and pray.
Yeah. You mean you can't no scope if you don't have a scope?
Yeah.
Right? No, you can always no scope.
I just no scoped you with this rocket launcher.
The rocket launcher has a scope.
Does it? Oh, you're right. I don't know where it is physically on the rifle, but no, you're right. It does. Brute shot?
Yeah, I didn't know the brute shot was in too.
Yeah, that was where it was introduced. Okay, do you want to know the weapon loadout I got? I just died. But what? It gave me plasma rifle, and then my other weapon, which I swapped to, was brute plasma rifle. But it didn't give them to me dual wield. Which is funny, just like swap out the plasma rifle with another plasma rifle, but not one in each hand.
I also forgot about this.
I forgot about the what?
I can't remember. It's like a sentinel beam?
Oh yeah, that thing's super good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't realize how good it was.
It should not have unlimited range, or it should drop off.
Because I was like, oh, but it has so little ammo, but I started using it more, and I'm like, no, actually, this thing is fantastic.
You just have to treat it like a sniper rifle.
Yeah, just like barely shoot it.
Range, like super well close range.
Yeah, and since it's like, there's no projectile, it's hit scan.
Yeah. Oh wow, I did okay that match. It probably helps when I got... Because everybody on the enemy team went up on the roof of the building, and I had a beam rifle, and I just hit 3 shots in a row.
Yeah, that tends to help.
And then it took a while for me to get my next kill, especially since I was getting pistol SMG.
I'm not gonna make excuses, I'm just bad.
I am inconsistent.
I'm good at objectives, not because I'm good at killing people, but because I'm good at remembering to do the objective. But even today, I don't have that. Because I've forgotten to do the objectives today. But the game type I do best at is King of the Hill, because I'm like stand at that spot. I got that. Someone on the enemy team is named Gallons of Mayo.
Guess they like mayo.
It's a lot of mayo.
Sexy star playa.
UFO Skater 24. There's KA Caboose and KA Tucker. Do you think that's their clan tag? They put their clan tag in their username because some people do that. I hope your clan never disbands because you're going to have to pay that $10. Change your username.
Helps if you remember what button to change weapons.
Yeah. I love when you die and your body keeps falling and the leg keeps resetting you to the top of the cliff. So you repeatedly fall and then jerk back up to the cliff and then fall and then jerk back up to the cliff.
Oh yeah.
My favorite skin, though, is gotta be the squirt gun skin for the assault rifle. Gallons of Mayo's in a tank on the right side, by the way. As mayonnaise often is.
In a tank on the right side?
Yep. Everyone keeps a Mayo tank in their home. What is this, the Stone Age? Of course we have Mayo. I think visually my favorite Halo has got to be Halo 3.
I just honestly like it the best.
Yeah, I like the lighting a lot, and like the armor materials.
I think the reason why I like the battle rifle more than the DMR is that, especially when people are low, like no shield, you don't have to hit them precisely. Like you can spray across their body and hit them at least once.
Yeah, and also it just feels more satisfying to go
Yeah.
Like the DMR, just even if it's effective, it never felt good to use to me.
You ever get killed by gallons of mayo?
Yeah, I drown in it
And then
sometimes.
load in twice? Oh my gosh, I just sniped him with a power drain.
It kind of does suck that it seems most of the time, no matter how you design a multiplayer game, people tend to boil it down to like one thing that ends up being better than anything else and like take everything else out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like as much as I like Smash, competitive Smash players are like, yes, if we just ban all of this stuff. But like every Halo game boils down to one weapon.
Yeah.
And that can kind of ruin it. I guess that's why I prefer to play casually. I mean, one, I'm garbage. But two, I'd like to use more weapons.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of wonder, like, if it would make more sense to design their weapons with a counter system. But I don't know how you... I don't know. What do you do to counter the battle rifle? I guess that's also a map design problem, because, like, the counter to the battle rifle would probably be, I mean, either a sniper.
Yeah.
Which, being sniped is never fun. Like, repeatedly being sniped, it just feels like often there's not much you can do about it.
I mean, maybe slightly less damage even?
Yeah. Or have maps that are... The problem is that this BR is good at mid-range, but it can also scope, so it's okay at long range. So maybe it needs more bullet drop-off. And
What bullet drop is in this game?
not much. Halo does not have a lot of bullet drop, if any.
Yeah. I can't think of a weapon other than brute shot and missile launcher, maybe?
Yeah.
Obviously, a sticky launcher, things like that.
But that's difficult because if you add in bullet drop, that changes the entire feel of the game.
Yeah.
It's something that is a problem because I think a lot of the things that feel good in a Halo campaign backfire in Halo multiplayer. And you don't want them to feel too different, otherwise it feels like you're getting two different games, and then it also is more development work.
Is Valentine still in that tank?
I think he got in a new tank.
A new tank, okay. Oh, that's okay then.
Yeah, like, have you ever played a game where like the multiplayer and the single player feel like they play exactly the opposite? Like, did you ever play the Crysis multiplayer for any of the Crysis games?
No.
So, like, in Crysis, like, you know, stealth is an option, throwing objects is an option, like, getting up close and assassinating, like, but, like, and you can take a few hits before you die, especially if you activate armor mode. In multiplayer, it's like you die instantly, even if you're at full shields and have armor mode, like, you instantly die. And it's so weird, because they're the same weapons. And, like, the bow is way overpowered in Crysis 3. Because, like, it's insta-kill, it's silent, you can pick up the ammo, and it feels great in the campaign, but in multiplayer, most servers have to ban it. Because otherwise...
it's most games, because, you know, people... I feel like developers are lazy. They're like, oh, let's just find a silent stealth weapon that's easy early game, but for some reason it also one-hit kills.
Yeah,
every
like
single time.
Yeah, like how come the bow does that? Well, I mean, like I can understand from a stealth perspective because it's not very stealthy to shoot someone multiple times. The problem is that you're fighting enemies in pretty weak armor in the campaign, but you're fighting heavily armored super soldiers in multiplayer. So, like...
Oh, but it takes the same amount to kill them.
Yeah, like, for some reason, like, it skips their shields. Like, Halo does that with some weapons, where, like, some weapons are good at damaging shields and others are good at damaging health.
Yeah. Which, you know, makes sense.
Yeah. It's a shame that the battle rifle is good at both. But yeah, like, that's why some people...
Maybe lower shield damage.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe make people use plasma weapons more, and then swap to the,
I mean, that is the intention, isn't it?
It is the intention, but it doesn't work out that way. Like, you see it sometimes, but not that often. It's probably because weapon swap time is maybe too long. Maybe you need to be able to swap weapons faster. Maybe. That's also an animation problem because, like, how do we make Chief look like he's swapping weapons in a way that does not look absurd in both first and third person? Like, in older FPSs, they'd just instantly swap the model and it would not be an issue. But Microsoft probably cares about that.
Oh, I think I just pulled off half a bunny hop to maintain speed from a
from Man Cannon?
pad. Yeah. I've probably died like 25 times this game.
I've never died in any Halo match. So, take that. I also like the unnecessary water that Halo 3 has.
It's pretty. It
Yeah,
doesn't do anything bad.
yeah. It's like, but like there's like some water physics and caustics for like no reason, and like there's buoyancy.
Yeah, I mean, because the water majority is off map, so you'll die if you go in it anyway. But like here, this river.
Yeah, it's neat. I can understand why you wouldn't want to spend time on that as a developer, because not only is that time working on that, but it's also CPU resources that you're using up. Which is probably why stuff like that got cut. But it's neat. But I also understand being a game developer, you can't necessarily spend all your priorities on what's neat.
True.
You can probably mostly do that stuff if you're a first party developer because you need to make the new hardware look good.
And I think they were able to do that with Halos because, it was the console seller.
I mean,
And then
Xbox only exists because of Halo.
how many times did I die? Oh, less than you.
I'm very bad. I think if it's okay, I might get off now. It's 9:15, and I should probably eat a real meal.
Oh yeah. I was thinking about food too. But
Yeah.
that was fun.
Yeah, we should try and play more often, and we could try and
Yeah,
do more multiplayer stuff. Like, we could also do. I have been wanting to get people together to do a Civ game also for like a long time.
I also have, I don't know if you're interested in playing it. You suggested it to me though with Don't Starve Together. I have that.
Yeah, I have that as well. Um,
Um I also have Tabletop Simulator.
yeah,
If you ever want to do something with that, I'm not sure.
I have Tabletop Simulator as well.
And if you
Um,
have any other multiplayer games that aren't relatively expensive, I wouldn't mind getting.
let me look through and see what we both have. I'm also gonna end the stream and the recording while I do that.
Alrighty.
Um,